Okay, we're about to get started in a little bit. Just a reminder to those of you who are interested in speaking to tonight's agenda, we do ask that you submit these speaker cards. They are located on the back of your chamber benches. Submit one and then just send it up on this side to Mr. Rouhani and his crew. Okay, thanks for your patience, and I think all the technical issues that we have hopefully are now resolved. Welcome to tonight's Planning Commission meeting. We are at a deciding body that's been appointed by the Town Council to make recommendations on land use matters within the town of Los Gatos. We have one public hearing tonight, but there are several administrative things that we also have to take place at these meetings, and so we'll go ahead and get that taken care of now. First off, I do want to welcome you, and we highly encourage your participation. As I mentioned earlier, we'd like to have everyone speak. If you feel comfortable, share your opinions, and we do ask that you submit these speaker cards. You can do so at any point. Just bring them up to the front desk here. Just a reminder that if you need any of the materials that we have before us, they are located. We have copies. We have extra copies in the lobby, so you should be able to have that. And if we do run out, it looks like there's a large crowd, just let one of us know and we'll make copies. And just a reminder to silence any of your devices that make noises during the meeting. Okay? And with that, can we go ahead and go roll call?
Yes. Commissioner Bourgeois is recused tonight. Commissioner Ogle, we understand, is on her way. Commissioner O'Donnell is on vacation. So Commissioner Talasfor. Commissioner Erickson?
Here.
Vice Chair Jensen?
Here.
And Chair Sayak?
Here.
We have a quorum.
Okay.
Or we will. We
currently
do have a quorum.
Okay. So we can proceed. Okay. Commissioner Talasfor, would you mind leading us in tonight's pledge?
Happy to. Please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, so the last time we met was on May 11th, the last time we had an official Planning Commission meeting. We have the draft staff meeting minutes. And does anyone have any comments? And if there are no comments, can I get a motion for approval?
I make a motion to approve the minutes of May 11th.
May 11th.
Yes.
And a second? Second. Okay.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? So it passes 4-0. And we are now at written communications. I believe we have one desk item for item number 1. So commissioners, take a look at that, and if you need a little bit more time, just give me a quick nod, okay? And we are now at subcommittee reports. In addition to serving on the Planning Commission, each one of us also sits on a subcommittee. And since we last met, I believe 2 subcommittees have met, the first being Historic Preservation and the second, the North 40 Advisory Committee. And the joint town, and we also had a joint town council Planning Commission study session. Thanks for reminding me. Commissioner Erickson, do you mind giving us an update on historic preservation?
The Historic Preservation Committee met on Wednesday, May 25th, and discussed, finalized its comments and its actions with respect to the paint of the Cogshell Mansion, otherwise known as, a lot of people would know it as the old Chart House restaurant, so forth. They're proceeding on with painting that consistent with the historic nature of that building. The Historic Preservation Committee also considered a request to approve the removal of a single-family residence at 461 University Avenue from the town's historic resources inventory to permit the property owner to demolish the structure, and took positive action on that matter. The committee also considered a request to build a second-story addition on a single-family residence at 321 West Main Street, and on a historic home at that address. That matter was continued to a subsequent meeting. They also considered a request to make some exterior modifications to a historic home at 89 Broadway, which was also continued to a subsequent meeting. And then there was a request to approve some exterior modifications to the historic commercial building, the former, what most people in town would know as the former Borders space in the old town. The property owner is doing some remodeling of the area that was occupied formerly by Borders, both to allow office, professional commercial offices in the upper, the second story of the building, and to prepare to do some some different retail uses in the first floor of the building. They're going to do some minor modifications to what was the entrance to the old auditorium at the old elementary school, if you go far enough back into where Borders was, such that in addition to the main door that has presently 2 windows on each side, they're actually going to open those windows as doors to allow some on the what would be the left side of if you were facing the front door to the left side, to create a lobby for a new elevator that will be put in the building to provide access to the second floor office areas. And there also will be taking off some of the additions to the building, some decorative elements on the additions to the building that are not consistent with its historic nature and so forth. So the Historic Preservation Committee took favorable action on their proposal and recommended its approval and it will now go to the Development Review Committee and to the staff for a building permit and those kind of changes. Another part of the conversation related to just a potentially of interest to folks, that they will be coming forward, it appears, with a proposal to make some modifications to the deck area that would be to the side where a lot of people know where the entrance to where the Seattle's Best coffee area was, and opening that, using that as probably as a primary entry point for the retail that they anticipate developing in that area. But those proposals will be forthcoming in the future.
Thanks, Commissioner Erickson. Commissioner Jensen, since you are also on the North 40 Advisory Committee, do you mind providing us a quick update on what transpired at that last meeting?
I can do that. Lots of you are here for a proposal for a very major development. There's also a very large piece of land that the town refers to as the North 40. It is the walnut orchard, currently a walnut orchard, at the corner of Highway 17, Lark Avenue, and Los Gatos Boulevard. It's currently in preliminary planning stages, and there are a number of town bodies and committees that are looking at it. This past Wednesday, May 25th, the Town Council and Planning Commission had a joint study session regarding that property. We heard from various interested parties, including a potential developer, economic consultants, landscape architects, citizens. There have been a number of community meetings, so if any of you are interested, we'd encourage you to come out. I think the next one is June 29th. So we saw various proposals to develop the property, and we heard about input that we've received from prior community meetings. So we would encourage anyone who's interested to pay attention to that. The town is going to be putting up a website for a visual preference survey, which would show pictures or models of potential development, and actually anybody will be able to click on that survey once it's up on the town's website and let your opinion be known about different things that are being proposed for that site. So we encourage you to look for it. There'll be a link on the town website when that comes up.
Thank you. Okay, we are now at verbal communications. I have several speaker cards here, but I believe everyone is here to speak on the agenda item that we have on hand, which is 90 to 160 Albright Way. But if there is someone in the audience who would like to speak on something that is not on the agenda, you are also welcome to do so, and now is the time to do that. Okay, seeing none, we'll go ahead and proceed. We are now at agenda item number 1. And as you can all see, there have been a flurry of activity up here, and I hate to be rude. We normally give all these meetings our full attention, but we have several logistics that we're trying to work out. And we ask your quick patience as we take a 3-minute recess so that we don't have to be passing notes back and forth, okay? And at the end of that recess, hopefully we'll have all these problems that we're having resolved, and we can give you an update, and we can move from there, okay? So again, I apologize for that, but hopefully we'll resolve this soon. Okay, so 3 minutes. Okay, I realize that's longer than 3 minutes. But thank you again. I apologize. There were several technical things we needed to iron out. They have been ironed out. We can now proceed. And I hope that on my part, there will be no more interruptions. Okay? So as I mentioned, there is one public hearing tonight. It is 90 to 160 Albright Way and 1460 Winchester Boulevard. Plan Development Application PD-10-005, Mitigated Negative Declaration ND-11-004. And who will be providing today's staff reports?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jeff Bradley, our contract planner, will be presenting the majority of the item with some assistance from other staff.
Thank you. My name is Jeff Bradley, consulting planner. Before you tonight is a proposal seeking a rezone, a zoning approval that would expand the range of allowed uses on the property at the southeast corner of Winchester Boulevard and Highway 85. This item was continued from the May 11th Plan Commission meeting. There are additional copies of the staff report on the table in the lobby. We do have one additional desk item, as mentioned earlier, which includes 8 items of correspondence. The purpose and role of the Planning Commission tonight is to review all of the information before you, receive public testimony, and forward a recommendation to the Town Council on the requested changes to the plan development zoning for the property. Project proposals regarding the site and its proposed buildings would come before the Planning Commission at the site and architectural stage. Specifically tonight, staff is asking the Planning Commission to make a recommendation on 4 different items. The mitigated negative declaration and its corresponding errata sheet, the mitigation monitoring and reporting program, the plan development ordinance proposed, and the development agreement. This aerial photo shows the existing development of the site. As you can see, it consists mostly of single-story office R&D buildings built in the mid-70s with surface parking and vehicular access from Winchester Boulevard. Currently, there is approximately 250,000 square feet of office space on the site. This slide shows an illustrative site plan that shows one possible development scenario under the requested zoning. Specifically, the proposal seeks to attract a corporate headquarters type business within a Class A high-quality office space campus environment, and also to provide the ability to respond to market demand for office R&D space as well as multifamily housing and or senior housing. Overall, staff believes the proposal would be consistent with the Las Gajas General Plan, including its land use element goals for economic stability, transit-oriented development goals from the Vasona light rail element of the general plan, as well as housing element goals for housing near transit. To respond to the Planning Commission's concern from the last meeting on May 11th that more noticing was needed to notify residents of this project, staff expanded the noticing boundary for this meeting from the standard 100-foot radius from the project site, which is shown on this diagram with the heavy red line, to an expanded neighborhood boundary as shown in the thin red line that picked up the neighborhood behind Courtside as well as the neighborhood south of Lark Avenue. As covered at your last meeting, the requested PD approval would allow for a variety of land uses. 4 scenarios were developed to provide a basis for the environmental review and this entitlement process. It is important to note that the actual allocation of uses could be different than the 4 scenarios, but could not exceed any of the maximums in terms of office square footage or residential density. The senior housing scenario would allow for all types of continuing care arrangements. In terms of considerations for mass and scale, one of the major features of the project is a requested height of up to 85 feet. The applicant is requesting approval for 5 stories and 85 feet for the office portion of the project. Staff is recommending approval of 70 feet for senior housing and 40 feet for the multifamily scenario, consistent with the Avantino approval behind the existing Netflix, also referred to as the Gateway Project. There are mitigation measures in the initial study to address issues related to heights, including retention of existing trees and architectural controls.
And I'll be handling the next couple of questions. So at the last Planning Commission meeting, we heard a couple of questions from the Commission regarding the general plan and EIR, why this project wasn't included, why this is being processed as a plan development rather than a specific plan, why the project proposed has a development agreement, and why is there a 15-year term with a 5-year extension. So as the Planning Commission's well aware, there was extensive information in the staff report regarding these items, but just to quickly summarize, the general plan and EIR process began back in 2008 and was almost completed by the time this project was presented to staff in an informal means, and that was around April, May of 2010. By that time, the general plan was already on to the Planning Commission for review, final review, and then recommendation to the Town Council. In order to include this in the general plan, staff would have had to have had the project description a good 8 months prior to that time, so probably sometime in, I would say, the fall of 2009 to be included in the general plan EIR. However, it's important to note that the general plan has to make general broad assumptions for development over this given period of time, which was 10 years in the general plan. And as noted in the staff report, the assumptions included 1,600 residential units and roughly 944,000 square feet of commercial, office, R&D uses. A good percentage of both those types of land uses are assumed in the North 40. However, there was approximately 443,000 square feet of the office commercial uses and roughly probably about 600 residential uses that were not site specific, that we realized that development would occur because of assumptions that are made when in terms of using ABAG data to do our forecasting. So the general plan actually looks at from a very large scale and does not look at from a site-specific scale. And that's why you have a site-specific environmental review process that commences when a project is conceived. So that's the reason why it wasn't included in the general plan and the EIR. So why are we doing a plan development rather than a specific plan? Again, as in your staff report indicates that specific plans are a fantastic tool to use when you have lots of property owners, you have significant infrastructure that needs coordination, and you have a lot of assemblage of land that needs to occur to be able to make a development happen. In this case, we have one property owner. The basic background or backbone infrastructure is in place. We need upgrades to infrastructure to accommodate any future development, but the backbone infrastructure is in place. And so a plan development is the ideal tool to use in this case because there doesn't have to be land assemblage and we have one property owner. Why did we enter into a development agreement for this project? Development, and especially in a site where it's redevelopment, where a property owner is going in and potentially demolishing existing development and then redeveloping the site, there's a lot of uncertainty. And the development agreement from the property owner's perspective gives the property owner the vested rights to be able to develop the project as proposed. From the town's perspective, it gives the town certainty that certain infrastructure will occur and when it will occur. It gives the town the certainty that certain fees will be paid, that certain community benefit will be, and we don't need a nexus in this case, that we don't have to have the impacts of the project do not have to equal the benefit that the applicant is, the community benefit the applicant is willing to pay or the property owner is willing to pay. So it gives the town the ability to have improvements that go beyond that project. It also gives the town the confidence that the project that is before them, not under this application, because this is just zoning, as we've talked about, but under an architectural site that we've subsequent to this, will actually be built. And so that's really the basic reason why we enter into a development agreement. This is the town's first development agreement, so understandably there's a lot of questions about it and concerns for it. And why a 20-year term? A 20-year term, and in this case, we actually proposed a 15-year term with a 5-year extension, is very typical for a project this size and scale. Generally, in the early days, development agreements were around 10 years, but now, again, due to uncertainty in the markets, uncertainty in funding, that a 20-year plan is much more realistic. So I'd be happy to answer any questions at the end of the presentation if you have any on those items.
Thank you. The next two slides will detail additional questions we heard from the Planning Commission from the last meeting on May 11th, as well as some of the staff response contained within your staff report. 3 additional questions were, what is the balance of benefits between the town and the project? How will the creek trail be improved? And the Planning Commission requested more information on the way the environmental review was conducted. In terms of the balance of benefits between the town and the project, we did prepare a table on page 6 of your staff report that tries to show a little more graphically how some of the community benefits are structured within the development agreement. In terms of the environmental review, I would like to point out we have been talking about these different scenarios and sort of the caps associated with each land use, but it is important to point out that not all the maximums from each category could fit physically within the site. For example, if the maximum amount of residential units were constructed, it simply wouldn't be possible to fit on the maximum amount of office space. And so that's why the scenarios were developed to kind of reflect that corresponding reality on the site. In terms of the environmental review, because of the flexible nature of the zoning sought, the mitigation measures and the analysis were really driven by the worst case scenarios based on the analysis of the development. For example, for traffic, the all office scenario has the highest traffic generation rates. So all of the mitigation measures flow from that. So regardless of the actual scenario selected downstream during the A&S stage, the mitigation measures are keyed off the most impactful development scenario. So from that regard, the environmental review is actually quite conservative in the way it analyzed the entire project. Additional questions we heard from the Planning Commission were, why is a 5-story office building so crucial to attracting and retaining a business, and which tenants specifically are asking for such a height? Are any green building techniques proposed? And what is the town-wide office R&D vacancy, and specifically what is the on-site vacancy rate within the subject parcel? Generally, taller buildings allow for more flexibility in site design, and also are being found to promote more green standards in terms of natural light and ventilation to workspaces. The applicant is proposing a LEED Silver certification for the office buildings as detailed in his applicant letter attached to your staff report. The height as such would contribute towards increasing building efficiencies, promoting a collaborative workforce, and promote a healthy working environment with access to light and landscaping. Generally, Class A buildings built within the last 5 years in Silicon Valley have incorporated these building types and are in high demand. In terms of the vacancy rate information, staff's best available information is that the town-wide vacancy rate is 11%, and the subject site has a 12% vacancy rate. Last two questions on this slide, specifically Planning Commission requested more specificity on the proposed development plans and more public noticing to a wider residential area. We have had these discussions with the applicant, and for the reasons stated in his applicant's letter, he is not proposing a more specific development plan other than what has been proposed through the zoning application before you. And as shown on the earlier map, staff did expand the noticing quite a bit to pick up a wider residential neighborhood based on sort of logical neighborhood boundaries. Finally, and this should look familiar from your last meeting, this slide shows the staff's recommendations to the Planning Commission for your consideration. This is also found in the staff report. I won't read all that to you. In short, the Planning Commission has the option to generally recommend approval to the Town Council, recommend approval with modifications as you are able to come to agreement on, or simply recommend denial of the proposal to the Town Council. This concludes the staff presentation, and we have a full assortment of staff here from a variety of departments to answer any questions. The consultant also has a bevy of consultants available for question and answers, including their traffic consultant, their architect, their civil engineers, their geotechnical consultant, their economics consultant, who was a new addition since last time, and legal representatives, as well as the applicant himself. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bradley. Commissioners, any questions of staff at this moment? Okay. Mr. Bradley, I do have a question of you. Since our last meeting, I tried to do my own research on development agreements, and from the few that I've been able to gather information on, what I see of developer agreements makes sense of large parcels that work in phases. But what I found that was consistent with all of the ones that I was able to do research on was that the uses of those parcels were very specific, so that it was just phasing as you went along. In this particular case, the uses are still is what's nebulous. And so when the staff was putting this together, given that it was the first one, how did you find examples of a project such as this, where there's 3 different scenarios, and we're working with 3 different scenarios that may occur, may not occur within 20 years. And so can you explain how you guys came to your development agreement and what the norm in your own research was?
Sure, well, we can respond to that. With respect to development agreements, some jurisdictions require development agreements every time that there's planned development. It could be a very, very small parcel, but any time some California jurisdictions just have a ordinance and a policy that a planned development, anything that doesn't revert back to just general plan zoning, always requires a development agreement. So it doesn't have to be a large parcel. It might be a specific use. It might be a variety of uses, but it's a philosophical reason why a jurisdiction believes that there is benefit to a development agreement, and usually they are tied with planned developments. Additionally, with respect to Los Gatos, while the community hasn't done any development agreements in recent term, certainly the Bay Area is many jurisdictions do them as a routine. It wouldn't be uncommon for a jurisdiction to have 10s to 20s to 30s of development agreements through the course of a year, depending on the projects. Certainly a number of the staff and consultants that the town was engaged have worked on development agreements. Certainly we used development agreements and provisions in development agreements from many jurisdictions in the immediate South Bay area that do these types of developments. Development agreements aren't necessarily for a specific project. Very similar to a specific plan or a development agreement, gives the developer and the community the range of options to use. So it's not that it has to be, there has to be a specific project description. You have that in this case. It's going to be a maximum of a certain amount of office. If that's not entirely developed out, then there may be some percentage of residential or some percentage of a senior assisted type living realm that's proposed. So it doesn't have to be, you do have a specific project description with maximums based on what the site will accommodate.
Okay, thank you. I believe we are now at a public input portion. The way this works, I have several speaker cards in front of us. The applicant will have 10 minutes to speak, and at that time, the commissioners will be able to ask any questions of the applicant. Afterwards, those in the audience who would like to comment, you have 3 minutes to do so. And again, I'll call your names off. And then at the end of those 3 minutes, the applicant, you can come back and you can provide some kind of a closing based on the comments that you heard, and you'll have 5 minutes to do that. And along the way, we ask when you do come up that you state your name and your address and speak in the microphone. All of this information is being recorded, and we need all that information for our own specific records, okay? And so if Mr. Schenk.
Good evening. Excuse me. Good evening, Chair Sayak and members of the Planning Commission. Thank you for hearing us this evening. My name is John Schenk. My address is 700 Emerson Street in Palo Alto. I want to first thank you for your comments and your time on May 11th. Your comments were appreciated, and I believe the town staff report has been responsive to many of those comments. We've submitted a letter that's hopefully responsive to many of those comments and issues, so I won't go through and rehash what's already been said, if you will. But I do want to highlight a few points, and then I also want to let Netflix speak for themselves as well. To reiterate, we believe the zoning application that's before you is consistent with the town's vision that's set forth in the general plan. It creates a transit-oriented development where one should exist. Since 1994, the Vasona Light Rail element of the general plan has identified transit-oriented development in that area for this property, being near the terminus of a future light rail line, or a light rail line that exists, but a future terminus. And I guess specifically calling out housing and employment centers being a mix of uses that are called out for being good, to be together. On the employment center topic, we have the opportunity to retain Netflix today by allowing them to grow in town. Like all corporations, they have specific requirements that are not atypical of what corporations within the Valley are looking for today. I think the staff report, again, was good at highlighting what some of those points are. And I will, of course, let Netflix speak to their own needs on that. As for non-office uses on the site, we believe, an ideal location for housing for individuals, families, and seniors. Again, the general plan guided us originally in coming up with the uses that you have before you in the zoning application. It is a zoning, and as staff went over again, I don't have detailed plans around a particular development, et cetera, but the zoning sets forth the boxes, if you will, within which we can bring back a project when we have one prepared for you. The development agreement does lay out the community benefits. It also, in a way, I think of it as the string that ties those boxes together. It puts some belts and suspenders around what it is that we can do, when we can do it, how it can happen, et cetera. And in terms of the community outreach, we have sent correspondence to each person who submitted written correspondence to you for the May 11th hearing. Have offered some meetings. We're still working to schedule some meetings specifically with the La Rinconada area representatives. We did have a meeting last Thursday night with the Smith Ranch Court neighborhood where some good ideas and questions were raised. We're still following up on some of the questions that they raised there. We ask that you make a recommendation to the council tonight. It's important for our own processes with Netflix, et cetera, to find out what land uses we'll be able to pursue on our site. And at this time, I can do a little wrap up, but I will hand this over to David Hyman, who is the general counsel of Netflix, has been since, I believe, 2002, and has been involved in their corporate real estate, I think, for a long time from University Avenue. I certainly worked with David on the Gateway project and helped get those buildings squared away with him and with you so that they have been able to stay in town these past 6 years or so. But David, come on up.
Good evening. Thanks for allowing me to speak tonight. As John mentioned, my name is David Hyman, 100 Winchester Circle, Los Gatos. I am the general counsel of Netflix and have been that for about 10 years. I started off in Winchester, started off at University Avenue and have grown over to Winchester Circle. You know, Netflix is a homegrown company, and we continue to grow. We're very proud of the fact that we started and have grown here in Los Gatos. And we hope to be able to continue to grow in Los Gatos, and that's why I'm here tonight to speak in support of the Albright project. It really does. I have 29 seconds in which to continue. John, you didn't give me very much time. Plus five. Well, I won't be very long-winded. Look, we hope to be able to stay in Los Gatos, and the project at Albright allows us the flexibility to expand our operations. As you may know from the press reports and you see, we are growing significantly. In fact, we're in need of space as soon as possible. We're starting to lease space up towards Campbell. We're even leasing some of the buildings existing in Albright. And it's one of the important things for us tonight is to move this forward quickly, because we are in the process of trying to figure out what our options are. And as soon as we can figure out what is available for us at Albright, that will help us make the decision. The other thing that I wanted to address tonight, which you guys have highlighted here, is the height. One of the things that we are requesting of the developer is for the height. We would like to get 5 stories. And the reason we would like that is, quite frankly, efficiency for collaboration among our employees. We have found that the ability for our employees to walk from floor to floor, to be able to talk, is extremely important for us. The desire of management would be even to have more than that, but we understand there are issues associated with, look and feel of the town. But we think that this 5-story strikes a very good balance and is going to be a very appealing, building and complex when it's done. The other thing that by having the stories in density as opposed to being spread out is it allows for a lot more green space. One of the things that we do at Netflix is people get together outside of the buildings and have collaborative meetings, lots of open space within the company and outside the company. And by being able to have more density in a particular area, it allows us for more green space around that. So again, we want to stay in Los Gatos. We are very proud of being here. We hope that you guys will approve this project and push the project forward quickly. And I'm around to answer questions as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Hyman and Mr. Shank. Commissioners, any questions right now? I believe you'll have several questions. So, Commissioner Erickson.
Thanks, Mr. Hyman, for being here tonight, and thanks, Mr. Shank, for your thoughtful and forthright responses to the questions that were raised earlier. The staff report suggests that the maximum amount of square footage that might be developed on the spot, the 550,000 square feet, could be developed with 4-story buildings rather than 5-story buildings. There's some implications for that. Is that, and potentially you could have a different answer, the two of you could have different answer to this question. Is that a deal breaker for either or both of you? The 5 versus 4.
For us, it is very important to have that density, the height. It is a significant consideration for us in what's available and how we can operate. So in that sense, it's important. Characterizing something as a deal breaker or not is hard, but I will say that there are a number of things in flux, and that's one of them.
And just to add a little bit to that, I think just as for Netflix, it's very important. I think it's also very important to other corporations who may be interested, because it really does go to that look and feel and use and practicality of what the larger corporations are looking for in terms of, I call it headquarters quality space. That more vertical, smaller floor. You can get the same square footage going lower with bigger buildings. And when you get a bigger building, there's longer distances from the windows to the cores, if you will. It's not as light in areas when you pull in the buildings and go a little taller. Anyway, just a little more color on that.
Thank you.
Commissioner Telesfor.
Yeah, to follow up on that, and either one of you could answer it, or maybe your architect could, but one of the levels is the top floor, and that's the roof to screen whatever is up there, and I'm sure it's, in this case, air conditioning units, whatever it is. Okay, but we have developed, I believe, or progressed anyway, in how we design our buildings now. And being that this is a LEED, or you're trying to get the LEED certification, is there any other option to that floor that would really put it way up there? I mean, can we work with this? Is there something we can be creative about here?
I will defer I'll say yes, because I always think it's interesting to explore things. I won't say there's not anything to be explored. I will let our esteemed architect come up and help with some clarity here. I would add that wherever a building stops, I've seen buildings where they said, okay, no roof screen, or move the mechanical off and no mansard roof. When it's just the end of a building, personally, I find it more attractive to have some roof to terminate the top of the building, but it does make it increases the overall height. It does. So there's a trade-off there. But I'll let Bob Giannini, who's with Form 4, he was the architect, I guess he still is the architect, on the Netflix buildings that are in today, the 100 and 150 Winchester Circle, as well as the, I'll call him the master designer architect of the Aventino project that's behind it.
Good evening. My name is Bob Giannini from Form 4 Architecture. We're at 126 Post, San Francisco. And actually, John's point was well taken. And as you mentioned, a lot of the height is kind of our penalty for hiding roof equipment. There are other ways to do it, but you can put equipment on the ground. That takes ground space. But even in a sort of a sophisticated LEED building, there are still air handlers and things that need to be on the roof. And as John pointed out, sort of the twofer in that is on a building with this kind of architecture, it's always very nice to have a sort of a base, middle, and top. And so not only are we hiding equipment on the roof, which is a very efficient place to put the equipment, but it also kind of allows us architecturally to soften the building, create an interesting skyline. Because I think, when you think about height, it isn't really the number of stories, it's kind of what you do with it. So by stepping the building back, as we did at the current Netflix buildings, and introducing little roof elements that are lower on the building and then sort of capping off at the top of the building, really are all things that help reduce the apparent mass and make the building feel much more in repose and sort of comfortable in the site.
Thank you. I appreciate that, but I'm sure that there must be other things you can do with the other levels of the building as well. As far as, I think what we're trying to do here is shorten it. I mean, it is something we have held to, it's a standard, and we've held to it for many years. And not that I don't want you to have your space, but I can't imagine that you couldn't work with us a little bit and think of some creative ways to just lower that height. And because I don't have a vision, a picture, illustration in front of me, I really don't know what you're talking. I mean, I can't even see this, so I'm imagining many buildings, designs and styles. So,
well, to that point, I think what you're saying is there any place in the various floors that we could reduce it to
yes.
lower height? And one thing we did when we designed the original Netflix building is we did work to shrink the floor height of each floor. And when we came in with this proposal, we just used that as our starting point. So we said we're already using this quite tight height on each floor, and we'll do the same on this one. What that meant for us is we had to do complicated transfer beams and whatever to be able to get a decent enough ceiling height. So anyhow,
You can do
cutting the
that. You can
floor-
do that. Yes.
But we did it. We did
Yes.
it, and that's what we're proposing on this building, too, is to go with sort of what we're considering the absolute minimum floor height and the floor to floor. Taking all the equipment off the roof and just having the very top of the fifth floor be the roof would actually, in my opinion, hurt the architecture of the building because the building would have no top to it. It would just sort of abruptly stop. And yes, we could put all the equipment someplace else on the ground and use ground space, but we'd kind of like that to help soften the overall appearance of the building.
Well, there's many ways around that, I'm sure. We're just starting.
Certainly.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay. Any other questions? Commissioner Telford, did that answer it? Okay. And Mr. Giannini, so the current Netflix building at 100 Winchester Circle,
Yes.
the height of that is 55 feet?
Yes.
Correct? And what is the square footage of the commercial portion?
Pardon me?
The square footage of the commercial portion?
They're about 80,000 square feet each building.
80,000 of each building. And does that include the bridge in between?
It doesn't, but the bridge is, 10 by 60. It's about 600 square feet.
Okay. And so my next question, Mr. Hyman, and thank you for attending, because if you've been briefed on the last meeting, there were several questions that we had that you're most able to answer. Given that your current building's 55 feet, you have found hurdles, and that is why you would like a 5-foot story building? Is that what
I mean, the efficiency of having people together, and in a particular vertical configuration, we've seen in dealing with our new buildings, or they're now our old buildings, but in the existing buildings, that vertical integration is much more efficient and effective for collaborating among employees. I mean, in fact, originally there was no bridge to go across that. And there was an idea that being able to at least connect the buildings would be very helpful. And we have found that bridge has been extremely essential to connecting people between those floors. But the ability, people going down and around, there's inefficiency, and that provides hurdles for people to actually interact with people. And so the less hurdles that we can have, the better off we are. And that in a vertical configuration seems to be the most effective and efficient for us.
Okay.
So it is important.
And that vertical configuration is vertical 550 square feet. So it's not just a matter of you need 550 square feet that we can spread out over the 20 acres. You would like your office space, whether it's one or two buildings, that amass to that square footage to be 5 feet.
So I don't think the idea is not one.
No, not one building. No.
Yeah,
But-
not one building of 550,000 square feet. I think management would, if we could have a big structure in downtown San Jose, that might be something that people would find to be most effective and efficient. But because of our desire to stay in Los Gatos, we are willing to consider a less than totally optimal configuration, but the 5-story aspect of those buildings, or at least the ability to have that, is important.
Okay, thank you. And another question I have, do you happen to know what percentage of your employees live in Aventino behind the Netflix building?
I don't know the answer to that, but I don't think it's very many.
Okay.
No.
And then my last question is, do you happen to know any percentage of your employees that use VTA?
We recently began a shuttle service we have reached enough density in those buildings to start a shuttle service between San Francisco. It's a private shuttle service between San Francisco and our buildings. And we also have a shuttle service that runs to the Mountain View BART station. Train station, sorry.
And my last question, you're here representing Netflix, and so the questions that we have of Mr. Schenk that are specific to the residential portion of his proposed application, do you have any comments or thoughts on that, or you're strictly looking at the commercial portion?
I mean, to the extent that it enables us to move forward with the project, then it's something that we are in support of. But you're correct. In general, the residential aspects of it, we don't have any comments on.
Okay, thank you. And Commissioners, last look, any more questions? Commissioner Erickson.
I want to return to the height question.
Sure.
Because it's a sensitive one, obviously.
Understand.
So I appreciated your comment about go to downtown San Jose or downtown some other place and go up 20 stories or something. So that was going to be my question. So if there's efficiency, both energy efficiency and employee efficiency by building vertical space, what's the magic of 5 versus 6? Why didn't you come in with a 6-story building or a 7-story building? And how do we understand, if you would, the loss of efficiency?
Can we ask for 7
That's the loss of efficiency for, from 5 to 4, so that we can make some judgment that goes back to, and I appreciate you're not wanting to respond to the deal breaker phrase, but how do we make a judgment about what the loss of efficiency really is and why we might want to consider 5 versus 4 or 6 versus 4 or some other number?
I'll start real quick, only because we made the application for the 5 floors before we had a deal with Netflix. So, and that was really set with, I think, ideally from the office side, we would have asked for 8 floors. We just knew that was not going to happen, and felt that 5 floors was probably the level that we felt could fit within the town. So we started with that. And in terms of maybe just the math around the efficiency, I'll let David speak to it if he has an answer there. But the way I look at it is it's an extra 25%. If within that building, if we have a 4-story building and add another floor, I'm adding 25%. I don't know how that relates to that efficiency of communication. But Yahoo's new campus they've designed for themselves on a site is they're 250,000 square foot buildings, and it helps kind of guide where our companies what do they want their buildings to function like. It's a good example.
Yeah, and I don't have a formula by which I can tell you, 5 versus 4 or 5 versus 6. I think part of it is, as John pointed out, is that's what the application was, and we've, been somewhat consistent in, retaining that 5 stories throughout the process in dealing with the developer.
Any other questions? Commissioner Telesform.
Let me ask this question, and maybe it's too soon, but I don't know. When the commission worked with you for the development of the Sobrato property, we knew you were going to be the occupant. With this, we have an agreement with the town has agreement with the developer, but there's not any real guarantee that you would be there. So my question to you is somewhat simple, but would Netflix at all be interested in signing a letter of intent?
Would we be interested in signing a letter of intent?
Yeah, would they?
With John?
Yes, for this development.
So we have a letter of intent with him already. It's a non-binding letter of intent, and it's conditioned on a number of these things here that we're talking about, plus economics of it. So there's a lot there. But yeah, I mean, the desire for Netflix is to continue to stay in Los Gatos. We have 2 what we think are beautiful buildings there, and we'd like to have some more. And I think, part of your guys' concern is, as the planning commissioners, is height and aesthetics of it. And I think if you can look at what we've done over at the Gateway project, it's going to be a similar look and feel to that. And I think, ultimately, Los Gatos will be very proud of that project. Not only if Netflix is there, but if anybody is in there, because I think those projects will be, an entryway to the city or the town.
Thank you. And then I have one other question for Mr. Schenk. You said that you had some community engagement with the Charter Oaks Townhouse Association and also Smith Ranch Courts neighbors. What were the results of those meetings? What were the outstanding, glowing issues or concerns that those developments had?
Sure. From Charter Oaks, I would say there weren't any great glowing remainder items. I think I mentioned last time they had some concerns around where trash enclosures would be located in the future, et cetera, as they're currently basically on the property line. The Smith Ranch Court neighbors that we met with, and I don't want to represent, we met with the whole neighborhood. There was a subset that was able to make that particular meeting. And I would say their concerns were height, the residential use. It seems specific to potential school impacts, and traffic. And specifically, again, was their own traffic, their traffic movements in and out of Smith Court Ranch onto Winchester, and how that may be affected. And at the same time, and I appreciated there were some concepts around what might be done that could help mitigate an impact or improve their flow of traffic.
Thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions? And just one more. Is the current building at 100 Winchester Circle, is that LEED certified?
It is not.
It is not. And then is it Netflix's initiative or yours, Mr. Schenk, to have it LEED certified?
It's really a joint initiative in that to get the certification, you really need the shell, the building, and the core, as well as what happens on the tenant improvements to work in concert.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Okay, so please have a seat, and I'm going to go ahead and call speakers forward, and again, you'll have 5 minutes afterwards to respond. Okay, as I mentioned earlier, we have several speakers, so I'm going to call 5 at a time, just so that you know where you are in the queue. And then another reminder, please speak in the microphone. You'll have 3 minutes, and if you could state your name and address right before you speak. The first speaker will be Howard Berry. Afterwards will be Lori Berry, Jeff Black, Sarah Chafin, and then Lisa, I believe it's Shodoin, okay? So, Mr. Berry?
My name's Howard Berry. I live at 186 Smith Ranch Court. I'm glad to see that the town does have concerns regarding the height. That's my concern. As one of the closest neighbors to Albright, we do have concerns. I have concerns that I'm going to be looking at a building right outside my front door. I do have concerns regarding 5 stories. I'm not opposed to development, but I am opposed to a towering buildings right next to our neighborhood. So that's my concern. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Berry. The next speaker is Lori Berry.
Hi, my name is Lori Berry, and I live at 186 Smith Ranch Court. And I just want to go on the record to state that I do think that business is good for Los Gatos, and I'm glad that Netflix is here. But it feels like this meeting is less about a rezoning issue and more about what we can do to placate Netflix to stay and the developer. By asking for a 15-year development deal, we are handing over a blank check and assuming the risk that the developer should assume on his investment. And I'm saddened that at the first meeting that was here, the letter that was from Netflix was that they were threatening to leave if they didn't get their rezoning. And as a family, we lived with the back door to our home closed for 2 years as they built the superstructure they are in now. And I wonder how an owner could do that kind of construction and not get a commitment for a 10 to 20-year lease or make it easy for their tenant to threaten to leave. I also wonder why the planning department is making so many exceptions on the height when these companies have such a lack of loyalty, and what would keep Netflix here in the town for the next 15 to 20 years. At our neighborhood meeting, when John Schenk and Cynthia James were asked if they had taken this idea of the corporate campus out to market to see if there was interest from any other companies, John Schenk said that no, it wasn't taken out to market because no one else would want to be here. We are not in the Silicon Valley hub. So in addition to the 15 to 20-year development deal, we're gambling on a technology that may or may not be relevant in 10 years. There was a point when it was inconceivable for a large corporation like Netscape to disappear, and I hope we are not creating a corporate campus ghost town to live as a reminder to lack of planning or commitment to work with our town. Finally, how can we allow a developer to come in and set new height limits without any obligation to show visual height displayed to the affected community? And we've requested several times to the town and to the developer to show what 85 feet is to the surrounding community. Just so my concerns are not misunderstood, I'm not opposed to the development, and I'm not opposed to the senior housing that's proposed, but I am opposed to the height, and I am opposed to the fast track of this project because of corporate tenant threats.
Thank you, Ms. Berry. Any questions? The next speaker is Jeff Black.
Good evening. My name is Jeff Black, and I live at 362 Bachman Avenue. I wanted to offer my encouragement to the Planning Commission tonight to approve the applicant's zoning request. I think it's important for Netflix to be accommodated for their future growth and ensure that they remain one of the town's major employers and also one of the major tax contributors to the community. The applicant's request for designing a campus that includes 5-story Class A office buildings is consistent with the needs of today's high-technology companies that want green campuses and also want to consolidate their operations into integrated developments. These types of developments provide high-technology companies the ability to retain and hire workforces and be competitive in today's economy. I also support the providing residential options to the future and provide jobs to the close commercial developments. I understand that our town has housing goals to meet, and I think this site can accommodate some of these goals if the site is not fully developed as a corporate campus. Again, I thank you for your opportunity to speak tonight, and I encourage you to approve the applicant's zoning. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Black. Any questions? Okay. The next speaker is Sarah Chafin.
I don't know how to, I want to put something up. How do I do that? Oh, thank you.
Okay. She'll help you. And if you're going to be pointing to it, you can take the microphone out so that we can hear your voice as you're speaking.
Okay. I'm not a professional, but I will do my best. Just put this face up. Okay. Perfect. Well, the first thing that I wanted to mention before I even go through this is that I just received an email saying that the property was sold from Carolyn White to Peter Powell on May 4th, 2011. It was an email from First American Title. So I'm not sure if we can even proceed here tonight because the application is that the owner is I think it says on my card, Mike White, H&S Inc. And since I just received information that the owner is Peter Powell, I hope that we could confirm that somehow before we move forward, because, you know, all of the boards that are out say that Mike White or something is the owner. I think that's really important. This is a big deal for the town of Los Gatos to find out who we're dealing with. This project is going to increase the population of Los Gatos potentially with the residential part by 5%. And I feel there's been a real lack of transparency. It was not part of the general plan. There's been no vetting by the Community Development Advisory Committee. The Planning Commission has consistently, I think, been given late documentation as of our last meeting. And there is a lot of documentation, hundreds and hundreds of pages of reports. There have been no story polls or their equivalent so that we can actually see what is 85 feet. The initial notice was only given within 300 feet of the project. I don't know if you guys can see this, if we can make this a little bigger. I don't know if you can do that. And then the other thing is when we did meet with Mr. Schenk, which it was nice of him to come, he told us that this is basically, the scope of the project is a done deal. And so my concern is if this is a done deal, that this project, you know, has been green-lighted and it's going to go through, we have to involve the entire community so we can get a good plan for the city. Because, you know, we like Netflix, they've been a good neighbor, but we also want to make sure that we get something that fits. So I'd like to recommend that it goes back to the Community Development Advisory Committee, that we erect story poles or their equivalent I think that we really need to continue this meeting for 90 days so that we can look at this again in September. Netflix has been a good neighbor. I know that, they want to move this forward. Can you just give me one more second?
You have 30 seconds.
Okay, I know that they want to move this forward, but I think that they would probably give us the time to do that. And then in the notice, it has to say that this is 5 stories and 85 feet, and also this is a 20-year development plan. People don't realize the scope of this project. Finally, we need one plan so we can effectively talk about it. And we did ask Mr. Schenk to come up with one plan, and we said that we'd help him get a campus for Netflix,
Thank you, Ms. Chafin.
and he didn't help us.
Commissioners, any questions? Okay. And our next speaker is Lisa Shadoan. Thank you. And then after Ms. Shadoan, it'll be Eric Anderson, Zhenjuan Chi, David Clark, Robert Colhor, and Greg Davies. So,
hi. Oh, this is really loud. My name is Lisa Shadoan, and I live at 14284 Mulberry Drive, which is not technically the La Rinconada neighborhood, but it's off of Wedgwood along the driving range of the golf course. My community is just as impacted as La Rinconada is because we all have an exit down Wimbledon onto Winchester. And that's really that's pretty much the only way out of our neighborhood. And so I'm very concerned. I heard about this on the street from Sarah less than a week ago. Nobody in my neighborhood has any idea this is going on. But it will impact us severely, I feel, in terms of traffic. That's my major concern right now. So I would like you to postpone making a decision on this so that you can inform other communities that are also impacted, i.e. along Wedgwood there. There's just a huge residential area there that exits along Wimbledon right in front of where this project is being proposed. That area also needs to be told that this is happening so that they can also give you their input on any potential issues they might think there might be to the project. Thank you.
thank you. Any questions? Okay. Next speaker, Eric Anderson.
Thank you very much. My name is Eric Anderson. I live at 100 Cedar Crest Place. I live just behind Courtside. My concern is you're massing 21 acres into such a high density, and that traffic can only come out one way. As the speaker before me said, most people come up Wedgwood. They actually can get out another way. There is no way out of this except for onto Winchester. You're going to have 3 lights that are going to create a stacking problem. It's already very busy there with all the people at Courtside and all the people coming out of our residential neighborhood. We live in an area that's 9 acres and has 113 units. So I'm curious, how big are the units in the 516 units? Are they 2 bedrooms, 3 bedrooms, 4 bedrooms? You could be talking about 2,000 people trying to come out of one driveway, basically, that are exiting that. And then, of course, the massing, companies around here have been successful in 2-story buildings, 5-story, 8-story buildings. I don't think their success is going to be dependent on 5-story buildings. I think they can live within what the city of Los Gatos is, which is a couple of stories, maybe 3 stories. And I would hope that the council would take that into mind. Yeah, efficiencies are great, but they're building 7-story buildings in Sunnyvale on the freeway. This is on the freeway. It's a good location for redevelopment and for more massing, but I think with that one single exit, you've got to be very careful how many people you let in and out of there. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay, the next speaker is Zhenwan Chi.
My name is Zhenhuan Chi. I live at 178 Smith Ranch Court. And my concern is, the environment, the impact. One is the traffic. Right now, in the morning, if you want to go to, the northbound, the Winchester, if you want to enter the Highway 85, if there's some decent traffic on 85, will take you about 10 or 15 minutes to get on the 85. That's regardless how bad traffic on 85. So if we have another, the 500 plus unit of the single family house, I do not know what kind of impact in the early morning, the people want to get on the got the north 85. So sometime, I make a U-turn there, I have to wait for the two light because, the run on the 85 is jammed. So if you have another, the 500, the plus, the single family house, I do not know how to imagine how bad the traffic is. When that life lane is jammed, then that is the life turn, the lane. Then the life lane goes straight will be, will be blocked. So the traffic all the way will be back up to how long to where, I guess, have you ever done any, the study on or research on this, how long does it take to get on the, the northbound 85? I see your report, you say that no environmental impact or effect. So I do not know what exactly that means. This is one thing. And the other things, is the school, the capacity. So I live in Smith Ranch. During that meeting, we talk about, we have about 20, the family. Then we have 25 kids. So all the kids, I think most of the kids will go to Los Gatos School. And when you have a 500 plus, the single family house, and I know you have a different number. So, the probably is not like, not 500, the kids. But, that's the reality in my neighborhood. We have about 20, the house. Not every house has, all have the kids. We have 25 kids. Most of them, majority of them, will go to the Los Gatos School District. I do not know, if that's, what kind of impact in the school capacity. The last things, we have the 30 minutes, and it's, you mentioned you want to encourage, the interaction between employees. And how long does it take, from one employee from first floor to go to the fifth floor, talk to someone on the fifth floor? So, and I do not know if I'm going to have an elevator, how long does it take just to walk from the one end of the building to another end of the building? So right now you have telephone, you have instant message, you have email. I do not know how that can help.
Okay, Mr. Chi, thank you. Any questions of Mr. Chi?
Any question?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is David Clark. And just a reminder to those in the audience, I think it's common nature to look at the applicants when speaking, but we do ask, just in terms of processes, that you do refrain from making, you talk to us, and then if there are any specific questions, the applicants will address them at the end. Okay,
thank you. I've never spoken before the Planning Commission, so bear with me. I'm Dave Clark. I'm the president of the Board of Directors of the Vasona Oaks Homeowners Association. We're the community located just across the street from Vasona Park on University. We're the first community south of Lark, and we were not notified about this meeting. We just found out about it. We definitely oppose the project. We oppose it because of the traffic impacts that people have spoken about on Winchester and on Lark. We also believe that there will be cumulative impacts on University as a result of this development, as well as the sports park that's been proposed there. The traffic on University, there's too much of it right now. They go way, way too fast. This is a small, narrow, winding road right next to a park, and there's pedestrians crossing the road constantly, and there are real significant safety impacts on University that you should be aware of. And in addition to that, I think the 5 stories, while it may not be a deal breaker for them, it should be for the town. Yeah, many of us moved to the town because of the smaller town concept. There aren't any 5-story buildings here now. I think we should try and keep it that way. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Clark. The next speaker is Robert Colhor.
Hi, I'm Robert Kohlauer, live at 15827 Linda. I would like to speak in support of the project. I think you have buildings there, 70s style buildings, as was stated, surface parking that's not overly efficient use. I think the different scenarios that are proposed do fit within what was stated in the general plan. I think you have a group of investors here that feel that this is a good place to invest money, and you have a 21st century company that wants to make this their home. I think we should embrace it and improve the project. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Kohler. Any questions? And the next speaker is Greg Davies. After Mr. Davies will be James Deming, Pat Erst, Steve Erst, Richard Erst, is this a family altogether? And Janice Falk.
Hi, I'm Greg Davies. 11115 Glen Ridge is my address. I've been around for about 30 years in Los Gatos, and I guess my major concern is the fact that we've lost our car dealers, which I'm sure was a major source of revenue for the town, and I would really hate to lose Netflix. I've been, as of many of the people in the audience, been in the real estate business in the Valley for 40 years. I've watched the development of commercial real estate over those 40 years. In the 70s, we had 100,000 square foot floor plates. Companies operated with very little window line, but they wanted all their people on one floor. In the 80s, we started seeing two-story buildings with 25, 30,000 foot floor plates. In the 90s and the zeros, those 30,000 foot floor plates got moved into multi-story buildings. They got moved into multi-story buildings because it was proven that 30,000 feet really worked, and if a company was going to be larger than 120,000 feet or whatever, you needed to go up. So I was thinking about what could Netflix do? I mean, if Netflix needs to grow to 500,000 square feet more, or if they need to relocate from the Sobrato project to this project and they need a total of 500,000 square feet, are there other projects in the valley that could accommodate them? And I just thought I'd put together a quick list for you of about 6 projects that I can think of off the top of my head, and I'm sure the others can think of many others. But Perry Arriaga has a project at Brokow that's planned for 10 stories. EOP is supposed to build a project right at the airport with 8 stories. Boston Properties has a 12-story building planned and ready to go in downtown San Jose. EOP has 14-story buildings planned for Augustine. The Irvine Company has 6-story buildings out in Marriott Business Park. And then Sobrato has 10-story buildings planned in Santa Clara. So there are all these options that are available for a company like Netflix. Everybody would like to have Netflix as a tenant. And my fear is that the city or the town loses them because we refuse to give them 5 stories. I haven't seen a 4-story building or less built in over 5 or 6 years in the valley.
Thank you, Mr. Davies. Any questions? Okay. The next speaker is James Deming.
Thank you. My name is James Deming. I'm at 16151 Short Road. And I want to urge my recommendation of this project. I think Netflix is a great addition to our community. I'd like to see them remain here. I do have a concern about the impact if we go with residential, high-density residential, what it does to our schools here in the city, because they seem to be at capacity right now, and just how we will address all the additional students that would be coming into the town of Los Gatos. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay. Our next speaker is Pat Erst.
My name is Pat Erbst. I reside at 143 Newell Avenue in Los Gatos. I'm speaking as a neighbor and a resident who resided on Newell Avenue for over 30 years. In Mr. Shank's letter to the Planning Commission, page 9, regarding neighborhood outreach meetings with Smith Ranch and Charter Oaks, no one has yet to meet with the Newell Avenue or the residents behind Courtside. Yet they went a half mile on Winchester to meet with the business owners of Vasona Station and Courtside Club. Of course, there was no negative responses due to the potential for increased patrons and memberships at Courtside. What they left out was the neighbors who will be directly affected by this development, and that's our neighborhood on Newell Avenue. Next, I'd like to address the part of trees and landscaping. In his letter, the site currently has 440 trees spread throughout the property, ranging in height from 12 feet to 20 feet. Most of the trees are proposed for removal due to their locations within a developable area of the site, so the maximum impact could be evaluated for the CEQA purposes. The proposal is to mitigate the feel of the size of the development. The 5-story, 84-foot building, 2 to 3-story parking garage, by replacing these trees with trees that will be in boxes, he said, 36 inches by 36 inches. Even with Miracle-Gro, it will take more than 20 years to reach the height of the trees that are going to be removed, resulting in the loss of the character and the beauty of this existing property is a shame. I am one of the neighbors who will have to look at this 80-foot towering giant that will destroy the look and feel of this residential area. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? The next speaker is Steve Erst.
I have no relation to her. No kidding. My name is Steve Erbst. I live at 107 Brocastle Way in Los Gatos, right behind, if you know where Newell is or Brocastle is, it's right behind Los Gatos Elks Club. So same as most everyone here said, and the gentleman in front said, it's for me, it's really a lack of trust. I was here at the first meeting, and this thing was being ramrodded through us, and then he said he'd come back out and visit our neighborhood. It hasn't happened. I'm a VP of sales at a public and private company in my career. Currently at Cisco. Cisco builds 3-story buildings. I do telepresence, I do video, cell phone calls, telephone calls. You don't need to have a 6-story building. The other piece is, if a sales guy came to my office and said, hey, I've got an LOI, can't book it, guys. Sorry. LOI doesn't mean anything. There's no commitment here. I don't even know why we're still talking about it. The other piece I'm concerned about is traffic. We haven't even gone over that tonight. And I'm hearing that Wimbledon, you can only turn right when you leave Wimbledon. Going left to Winchester will be closed. That hasn't been come up tonight at all, and I'd like to have it come up. The other piece is the creek trail. That's great. They can build flowers and trees in the back of the creek trail on the bench, but for 200, 300 yards in the creek trail when you're running by, does anyone really care? The last piece is the housing. So my kids go to Dave's Avenue, and I've had to, last year I had to get up at 5 in the morning and wait outside for a ticket for my kid to go to school. I went to Dave's Avenue. My oldest goes to Dave's. I was number 80. Cutoff was 81. So having more kids here is not going to help. We don't have room. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Next speaker is Richard Erst.
Well, they want a minute, but that's my wife and son. My name is Richard Erbst. I reside at 143 Newell Avenue, Los Gatos. I'd just like to make a comment here that most of the people who are objecting to this, and I can't say for everyone, most of the people objecting to this don't live in our end of town. They live in this end of town. So they don't have any real understanding about what the concerns are that we residents have about the traffic. I just want to go over the traffic real quickly. In a half a mile distance, 1/2 mile, there'll be 7 stoplights. There'll be more red lights in some places in Denmark, if you follow my drift. In addition to that, I don't think that the traffic concern took into consideration the fact that there's going to be the soccer field on University, which will add further impact to the traffic in that area. It says that the traffic, that there's, I think it was 1,300 and I'm reading here from page 14 of the Commission's planning, there are 3,126 daily trips. In addition, when staff didn't prepare, and they're doing it now, they've got those little rubber things out you drive over to know what the traffic concerns is in that area in the first place. It's tremendous. One of the staff members said at the last meeting that they visited the site and they had a problem getting out of the site because of traffic. Now, I could have had a V8. It doesn't take a brain surgeon to figure out that that is a heavy traffic concern. I would also add that the decisions you make about this development are going to materially impact the town of Los Gatos, the character of the town of Los Gatos. I want to say it one more time. The character of the town of Los Gatos. We start out, and I have no problem with Netflix. I don't use them, but my family does. But I don't care about that, about Netflix, in terms of whether or not Netflix belongs here or doesn't belong here. It's irrelevant to me, because the development hasn't been decided that Netflix is going to go there. It starts out with 3 stories. Now we're going to go to 5. And when you get to the North 40, what are they going to say? Well, you've approved 5, let's go to 10. So what we wind up with is the city of Campbell, not a town like Los Gatos is in the character of the town of Los Gatos, but a city. So we're going to wind up with a prune yard over on North 40. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay, the next speaker is Janice Falk. And then afterwards will be Michael Johnson, Dale Miller, Barry Minkin, Patrick Mockler, and Jonathan Noble.
Hello, my name is Janice Folk, and I reside at 14690 Hancock Court. It's the La Rinconada neighborhood behind Courtside. Netflix commitment is contingent upon the changes included in this zoning change proposal, relieving Netflix from assuming full responsibility of the entire parcel. Netflix wants the option to build out the entire parcel, but not immediately. Nobody knows these financial risks better than Reed Hastings, and he has no interest in assuming them. This plan places those financial risks on the town and the homeowners of Los Gatos. Netflix is a great company that has provided nicely for the town, but just as they displaced an existing media delivery model, they could be replaced very swiftly if Apple reaches agreements with major studios to release movies on iTunes or an iCloud, or if Sony decides to provide direct delivery of the Columbia Pictures content via the PS3. In order to provide this guaranteed relief, the developer has promised to offload any unused portions as residential, not the open green space that Netflix has alluded to tonight. There are no commitments for any ratio of office to residential. Therefore, any projections of tax revenue must be given as ranges. Promises of more jobs and more property tax revenue must be consistent. One, the other, or some lower mix is a reality, but not the best of both. Why would A&S fees be set at a specific rate completely independent from any timetable? Leases and rents are typically set for specific rate for a fixed period of time, then either changed at a predetermined schedule or determined by fair market rates in the future. Fixed and capped forever, or in this case for 20 years, is not fair to the public. The report states that Class A buildings with high-density multi-story structures are in demand. Rates have collapsed for this type of space over the past 5 years and show very few signs of recovery. If demand were truly that high, the alternative use of the housing option would not be necessary for this proposal. No significant environmental impacts have been identified as a result of this project. Does that mean that the addition of 516 or 600 senior homes, which could be 5% of the total number of homes in the town, will not have any impact? No impact on water, sewer, power, waste, schools? That makes no sense. In the aesthetics portion of the report, the initial environmental impact study states that development of this size and scale does not conform to the intent of the general vision plan statement. But who has the authority to determine what is significant? If you're going to ignore the spirit of the general plan, the zoning of this parcel, the height requirements, the water quality, the air quality, and all the recommendations of the general plan in the case of this request, then you need to remove all those restrictions for all future projects within the town limits, or simply publish that our rules and regulations are for sale. If you choose to ignore all the existing regulations and grant this request, you've set a precedent that other parties would also be entitled to. There has not been a sufficient demonstration of due diligence and fiduciary duty by this Planning Commission to justify granting wholesale exception for the existing regulations.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay. Next speaker is Michael Johnson.
I wanted to thank the Planning Commission for allowing me to speak, number one, and for giving me the notification. I'm Michael Johnson, 14685 Oka Roads, Space Unit 42, and also have a rental on Moore Avenue, so I'm pretty lucky. I'm in the area there. I just wanted to thank. I'm a big Netflix fan. I've been using them for years. Admire the construction at Winchester in '85. I do have some concerns since I am an environmental inspector, so that's my background somewhat. Does the developer plan on when he tears down the building? I guess I'm looking at the construction demolition. Where's it going to go? Are they going to recycle that? Is there going to be enough police to handle? Are you going to have to ramp up the police? That'd be a question on that. Can schools handle the load? That's kind of a question. Even though my kids are older, I'm kind of hoping my grandkids move to Los Gatos. The creek, how will the developer protect the creek, number one? And just a suggestion to Netflix that they may want to look at having a grants person to work with the creek. As you know, there's grant money out there for creek, but they may want to have a dedicated person for that. Also, are you going to plan on building a restaurant in the area? Are you going to feed your workers in there, or are they going to have to drive out for lunch and stuff like that? That's something I would be, if I was working in the area, I'd like to have something I could just eat there as opposed to going out. Not that I'm going to be working for them. Schools are big. I see the balance between the city and the town. It's a big benefit for the town of Los Gatos and Netflix. Wow, it's incredible. I can say that as environmental inspector in the city of San Jose, I drive around a lot and I see a lot of huge empty commercial buildings in San Jose. I saw that Oracle bought out BEA for that Sobrato building. That's an 18-story. Currently, I work for the city of San Jose in a huge building, 18 stories. Yeah, it's nice that it really is nice to be working on. I work on the 7th floor, but I can go to the 11th or the 18th if I want to meet somebody or do something or work on a project. It's a huge benefit. I just wanted to say, I guess my time's getting down low. It's a huge benefit for you to be working and sharing ideas with your fellow coworkers. As far as LEED certification for buildings, that's huge. I mean, I see that all the tough things that's required. If they're coming out to say that there's a LEED certified, they're going to try to get that. That's huge because that's a huge commitment on their part. Also,
Mr. Johnson.
Yes, ma'am.
Your time's up.
I just wanted to say the letter of intent is serious on both parts. I think that's big.
Okay, thank you. Next speaker is Dale Miller.
My name is Dale Miller. I live at 115 Newell Court. I live directly behind the Elks Club. My neighborhood was not contacted at all, as was requested to contact other neighborhoods and have a separate meeting either. I'm opposed against the application to change it. There's too many options. It seems like all the options favor the developer, and the city and the local residents will have to take the consequences if things don't go as planned. The main issue I have is traffic. As many people have spoken, Newell Avenue is a cul-de-sac. The only way in and out of Newell Avenue is through Winchester, and right now traffic in the morning and the evening is impossible. If you go down to Wimbledon, Wimbledon's the only way out for the La Rinconada area. You go down to La Rinconada, it's really the only way out. There's a couple back ways out. You can sneak out through Pollard, but it's not very effective. So the main issue I have was with traffic. If you take the North 40 plan that's going in, we need to consider that. This should not be a standalone project without thinking of the North 40. If you go from 17 down Lark to Winchester at 85, that little triangle right there, traffic's going to be really horrendous when the North 40 is developed, no matter what they decide to do there. So the traffic has to really be thought carefully. I'm not opposed to the business park concept, but there has to be a way to either limit parking and force people into commute mode or into VTA, or you have to limit how traffic goes in and out. Right now, the courtside parking is a mess. If anybody's tried to go on 5 o'clock and see courtside, it's parked all on the streets, it's parked in the parking lot. They're using the Elks Club right now, which I'm not sure is legal to their T's and C's either. But the courtside is expanding like crazy. So with the way Wimbledon's set up with just 2 lanes, the way Newell's set up with 2 lanes, both in and out of Newell Avenue, 2 lanes, La Rinconada 2 lanes, it's very, very difficult to get out. We're not talking about the other lights that are going to be put in. There's proposed to be put in at Albright. There's one to be proposed at University. So there's no way you'll be able to go 1 block without having a stop-and-go light when this proposal will go through as it's proposed today, without really looking at traffic and looking at traffic flow and the impact for the North 40 and this project combined. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker is Barry Minkin.
I'm Barry Menken, 101 Charter Oak Circle. A lot of the comments made tonight, I'm against changing any of the modifying the zoning for this project. Some of the reasons. One is the height, and I was somebody who worked for Stanford Research Institute in designing research parks, and it is complete nonsense that of efficiency on vertical buildings versus low-story buildings. So I think one thing, that height can go down, and you have to have a better reason to put that in. What particularly bothers me is how it's going to impact the nature of Los Gatos. Particularly walking along the trail, which to me is a sanctuary for the soul. In Charter Oaks, we have the colors, we're blended in. The existing industrial park that's in there now is not obtrusive. You go to the Netflix buildings, I find, and go through that area, completely compact, a completely different feel. And when you're getting that sense off the trail, it just takes something away from the trail, which is one of the great benefits from the town. So one thing is size, screening, color, and distance away from the trail, and also limited entry to the trail from this development. I like the idea of in R&D parks. There are plenty of them. There's plenty of space. I write about economics in the future. There's not going to be a tremendous need for these things in the future. It'd be good for Netflix to come in and work within the city, but the benefits seem at this point to be for the developer and for Netflix, but certainly not for the people in the area. And us in Charter Oak Circle, just trying to get out onto Locke Avenue is a complete nightmare that is being looked into now. Almost impossible. You risk your life at this point because we don't have a light on that. And it would be a very, very dangerous situation unless there's some way to mitigate traffic, or else you just have to work within the zoning that you have. You have a research park there, upgrade it. And keep the same colors that you have, not the Netflix garish colors. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay, next speaker is Patrick Mockler.
Good evening, commissioners and town representatives. My name is Patrick Mockler. I live at 181 La Montagne Court in Los Gatos. I drive by the subject site 2 to 4 times per day, as I only live a few hundred feet away. I grew up in Saratoga, and I've lived in Los Gatos for the last decade. I know most people are afraid of change, and especially when it's an unknown. However, our community has a unique opportunity to copy the success of the Netflix and Avatino project right next door. Because we have a great example next door, the risk of change is greatly minimized. It doesn't matter who occupies it, just copy the designs of the buildings. Traffic, height, and quality are of utmost importance. All these factors can be mitigated properly if designed the right way. For example, traffic will increase, but if the traffic engineers design the right flow and turning lanes, the community will not feel the impact, just like the way the Netflix and Avatino buildings were designed. What a beautiful building to drive by every day, and I have not noticed a severe impact since the completion of that project. I urge the town officials to ensure a quality project and add their input to keep the high standards of Los Gatos. I would also like the town to pay close attention to the traffic circulation plan, as this will be key to making everybody happy. Can you imagine if Netflix did not have the opportunity to make Los Gatos its headquarters? The benefit to the town revenue, local retailers, local homeowners has greatly appreciated. It would not exist without the approval of such a project. The future benefit of world-class office space, high-end apartments, and/or senior housing to our community clearly outweighs any downside if the project is designed properly. I urge the town's full support and approval of this project to be just like the current Netflix building. I also want to thank Netflix for being located in Los Gatos. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions, commissioners? Next speaker is Jonathan Noble. And then after Mr. Noble will be Leslie Politis, Bill Putterbaugh, Grant Sedgwick, Tom Woodruff, and Ulrich Hansen.
Commissioners, good evening. My name is Jonathan Noble. I live at 16231 Escobar Avenue in Los Gatos, and I'm here in support of the mixed-use proposal before you. I spent 10 years working in public service, focused largely on land use planning as well as economic development, and have spent the past few years working both in the development arena as well as the high-tech sector. First, let me commend the town for its forward-thinking and innovative land use policies in support of mixed-use, transit-oriented development. Municipalities throughout the Bay are approving these policies. They recognize the benefits they provide to these communities far outweigh any negatives. The longstanding Vasona Area Plan and recently updated Town's General Plan reflect a smart and critical evolution in planning. The mixed-use proposal before you not only fulfills this vision, but in many ways surpasses it. It provides the opportunity for high-quality, higher-density residential in an area that can support it. More importantly, it provides the opportunity to keep a signature Silicon Valley company in Los Gatos, something few believe could exist in Los Gatos just a few years ago. Los Gatos doesn't have a lot of office space, doesn't have much grade A office space. We've got an opportunity to change that with this proposal and keep a prime tenant here. Many companies like this that are growing in towns get chased by other municipalities, whether it's Santa Clara, San Jose, any number of other companies. They come with cuts in electrical rates, tenant improvement grants, tax breaks, things of this nature. Why? Because there's no debate about the benefits economic development brings to a community. Policymakers and residents simply understand that more economic development means more and better jobs and a rising standard of living, both of which contribute to retaining or increasing the level of community services. Los Gatos does not need to offer subsidies in this case because they simply need to say yes. We want to increase our tax base, we want high-paying jobs and high-quality housing in our community, and we want a new development that fulfills our general plan goals. I would ask that you recommend approval of the mixed-use proposal as put forward by the applicant. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next speaker, Leslie Politis.
Hi, Madam Chair, fellow commissioners. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak again. I'm the assistant superintendent from the Los Gatos Union School District, and I live on Ann Arbor Drive in Los Gatos. I just wanted to share with you tonight my concern about the open-ended development agreement. I'm certainly not opposed to development, but I'm struggling with the open-ended agreement, which creates an opportunity to reduce uncertainty for infrastructure and economic issues, and also for the developer in terms of what really happens over that time with commercial and residential opportunities for a profitable development. But it greatly creates uncertainty for me in the school district trying to plan for our capacity and our enrollment. So I'm struggling a little bit with that. The general plan, while this development meets the tenets of the general plan, it wasn't in the housing element of the general plan, which is something that I use when we go out for bonds to understand what my capacity is and what I'm going to do. We are now out of bonding capacity, and I'm not sure when I went out for the last bond measure if I would have done what I'm doing with that bond money if I had known we had this issue confronting us, and it's pretty hard to forecast and predict that. Our elementary schools are all currently unfavorable to the California Department of Education recommendations for acreage for the number of students. We're already there with the capacity we have today. And again, not knowing what was in the general plan is making this really difficult for us. So I'm just asking that the Planning Commission consider the possibility of including conditions that would allow for further discussion on the residential development piece in particular, and offer future support by the town to help mitigate the overcrowding of our schools. I think when people come to this town and say, you know, what's cool about Los Gatos, in the top 5, usually Netflix and the education system here come up. So both great ideas, but I'm just really concerned about the great idea of the quality of education for the future kids in Los Gatos with what we're confronting. I'm usually pretty resourceful in figuring out how to solve problems, but we've got a little bit of a perfect storm dynamic here with what's happening with student generation rates, enrollment, and our bonding capacity being kind of wiped out at this point. So, thank you.
Any questions? Commissioner Telesford?
Could I just ask you to clarify? First of all, you suggested 2 conditions that would help the school district, but I also wanted to know, have you been in conversation with the developer?
Yeah, Mr. Shank came to visit with myself and the assistant superintendent several months back and shared with us what he was planning on doing. I know that, of course, they would be paying developer fees, but I'm also concerned that those would be fixed at the July 1st rate, and by the time that perhaps we learn that commercial zoning isn't what we want, that it'll cost a lot more to build facilities than those rates will allow. As a matter of fact, the developer impact fees are already not enough under Senate Bill 50 to cover the cost of building what we're having to build today. Public school construction is getting very expensive because of all the safety requirements and everything else. So, yeah, we've talked to them. They've told us what they're doing, and they've shared that they feel that they're contributing to the, problem of building more schools by paying their developer impact fees.
So that you suggested a condition. Can you say? Would you please repeat that?
Oh, I was just asking that the Planning Commission consider some kind of a condition be placed on the approval of this development that gives us the opportunity to revisit the residential rezoning piece without locking us into this open-ended 15-year thing at today's developer impact fee rates for whatever might get built at some point that affects the schools that are already, quite frankly, experiencing crowding and enrollment challenges.
More questions? Or okay. Actually, I do have one question, but before I ask you mine, I want to make a quick question to staff. My understanding is that the developer agreement is only an agreement between the town and the developer. The school district would not be affected by the lock-in of rates that we agree to. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
The town cannot negotiate for the school district.
Okay, so if we do a justification study and those rates are increased, those increased rates would not be bound by this term. Okay, great. That's helpful. Thank you.
I just want to make that clear. But that's a good segue into my next question. At the last public hearing, I believe it was Commissioner O'Donnell had talked about community benefit. He's well aware of SB 50, and actually I'm trying to learn as much as I can in a very short period of time about it. But my understanding is that we as a town and you as a school district are limited by what you can legally charge. But there are certain aspects like community benefit that we always ask of a developer. It's almost like soft money, I guess.
Right.
And that was one of the questions posed to you. Have you been able to think about it in the past 3 weeks? And are there specifics? You mentioned offer support from the town. Are there specific things that from us, the town, that we can help you with other than what you as a district?
Yeah, I mean, this definitely gets to be the difficult part of it, and I'm not supposed to look at my developer friends, but I do wish that we could reach out to the developers and encourage more community benefit type contributions be made. It was mentioned at the North 40 meeting, which I think we need to look at in conjunction with this, that there's 40 acres there, and while some people would like to see an elementary school built there, it takes 5 acres to build a school. That's not the best use of the property. If you take the proposed student generation rates there plus this development, we are looking at a school at this point in terms of those two combined, and I don't know where we would put it if we don't get some contribution of land. You know, what in this town would need to get torn down so we could build? Where would I get the money to buy the land with the bonding capacity issue I have until property values go up? So I'm kind of trying to figure out if I can just keep, you know, sharing with you my challenge. Will I have your support on a going forward basis when we start to run into these obstacles that I think are clearly going to affect the quality of education in the town if we're not kind of staying one step ahead of it?
Commissioner Telesbar?
As a follow-up to that, a question for you, I have no idea, but if we couldn't build, if the school, another school could not be built, could you add or build other classrooms onto the school sites today?
Yeah, so right now, again, we're using the $30 million bond that the public voted yes on last June to remodel Lexington up in the mountains and add some classrooms to the middle school and another school. And the California Department of Education publishes guidelines. You don't have to build within them, but it's the notion of what's best for a child's education is how many, what does the footprint look like relative to the acreage? And we're already over that footprint on all of our elementary schools. So the next thing we'd have to start doing due to cost constraints is throwing up some portables and making those existing sites even more, you know, crowded from an acreage standpoint, if you will. And you know, Fisher and Van Meter and Blossom Hill, I live off of Shannon Road. My family, we all 4 drive. We plan our days around not going out when school's coming and going. And, you know, those are the 3 schools that these developments would be piling kids into. And I'm just wondering, you know, the traffic and the portables and the quality of education as deemed by the CD's recommendation for how many kids you try to educate and put on one site. I think there's some concerns about that, but, you know, we could put up some portables if we had the money.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Next speaker is Bill Puderbaugh.
I'm Bill Puderbaugh. I live at 183 Longmeadow Drive. I've been a resident of Los Gatos since 1974. The reason that I came here was because of Atari. Because I was around when Atari was starting its business in Los Gatos, and they had a warehouse and manufacturing building out right about where Albright Way is now. And through various things, Atari was forced out or had to move out of Los Gatos and ended up over in Sunnyvale. So I'm thinking, well, now they're talking sort of like the same thing again with Netflix, that, you know, the Netflix will be forced to go somewhere else. So at least from what I understand about the things that go on within the towns, is that you're required in your general plan to agree to a certain amount of density. You have to increase the amount of density in Los Gatos. All the other towns around the South Bay have got to increase their density because population is growing. So we're stuck. You've got to do that. Your general plan reflects it. You know, everybody's endorsed the general, or you're going to endorse the general plan. So we have to increase density. Well, where else is it going to go? At some place we're going to have this discussion where whatever property is going to become more dense. We're going to have the discussion. So it seems to me like this project just sort of makes sense. It's going to mean more traffic, but we're going to have more traffic with any other density. And the fact that they want to build 5-story is really inventory for Los Gatos, from my point of view, because if Netflix moved out, those are very leasable buildings, and you'd want to have a leasable building. You'd want to have what the industry wants, because if they move out, you want to have another good company move in. So I'm in favor of it, and would recommend its approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, Grant Sedgwick.
Madam Chair, members of the Commission, my name is Grant Sedgwick. I live on Hernandez Avenue in Los Gatos. I would like to speak in support of the application. I'm not an expert in the economics of Netflix or other corporate office uses. I did think Mr. Noble expressed the notion of mixed use on this particular property as being a very appropriate way to think about the land use. I do wish to speak about the housing alternatives that might ultimately find their way into this development plan under the as the applicant has proposed. This is actually a very fine site for a residential development. I've heard the traffic issues and I understand those, but when you weigh those against the proximity to the light rail extension, the adjacency to the Los Gatos Creek Trail, the fact that it is a residential, primarily residential neighborhood surrounding. It's neighboring the three major recreational facilities in town, the JCC, the Los Gatos Swim and Racket Club, and Courtside we've heard a lot about. Has accessibility to the freeway. It's flat land, not hillsides, and is a large assembly of land under one ownership. All of those things argue for this being actually an ideal housing site. Now, I'm a developer of and advocate for seniors housing. I'm not an expert at all in the multifamily product that might be an alternative, but as a developer of seniors housing, I can assure you that some of the concerns, almost every one of the concerns, were there to be a residential component in the mix, would be mitigated and in fact far less significant were a seniors housing component a part of the project. Traffic impacts would not only be less than office use, less than multifamily housing, they would be less than the current traffic generation of the existing campus. There are no school impacts, almost by definition. And frankly, I think seniors housing as a component of a mixed-use project here would better serve the residents, the existing residents of Los Gatos, than a new project of multifamily apartments or townhouses as we could imagine might be described as an alternative. So I would encourage you to approve the project or approve the rezoning as has been proposed. Mixed use is a very enlightened way to think about land uses with all of these attributes that I mentioned, and a seniors housing component would absolutely be a positive both in the site and in the mix of uses and for the town generally. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Sedgwick. Any questions? Okay. Next speaker is Tom Woodruff.
Hi, good evening. I'm Tom Woodruff, and I reside on Shannon Road in Los Gatos. And I'm here tonight representing the Los Gatos-Saratoga Union High School District. And just for your edification, Ms. Pilatus represents Los Gatos Union School District. That's a school district that serves students primarily in Los Gatos, grades kindergarten through 8th grade. The Los Gatos-Saratoga High School District serves Los Gatos students from 9-12 and includes the city and community of Saratoga and some of the surrounding area as well. We are also concerned about student impacts with regard to this development. This last year, we closed intra-district transfers into Los Gatos, which is to say if you live in the community of Saratoga and would like your student to attend Los Gatos High, we're not able to permit that because Los Gatos has reached its housing capacity. That school in particular, just being down the street from where we're sitting tonight, is it's landlocked. We couldn't purchase additional land very practically to expand the school, and it wouldn't be practical to build, a 5-story school kind of a thing. So the capacity of that school is problematic at this point, and additional students would create issues. With regard to the one option that the governing board of the high school district would have would be to do a boundary change, which is to carve out a portion of the Los Gatos community and have those students attend Saratoga High School. Whether that is an option the governing board would do or not would remain to be seen, but certainly we have capacity at Saratoga High School. We currently do not have capacity at Los Gatos High School. The other thing I wanted to mention is, assuming that were to come to fruition, we would be probably busing students to Saratoga High, so there would be some environmental impacts related to that. Thank you.
Any questions? Okay, thank you. Ulrich Hansen. And then after Mr. Hansen will be Malcolm Mosher, Tim Tongas, and then the final speaker would be Rod Wilson.
My name is Ulrich Hansen, 159 Smith Ranch Court. I also have concerns about the traffic impact of the development as it is proposed. In addition to some of the aspects already raised, I believe that the addition of a residential development component will also cause traffic issues to happen over the weekend and the off days of the week as well. Where right now the traffic dies down a little bit on Winchester Avenue, if it's a large residential development, that will continue on through the weekends, and I think it's severely underestimated how bad it can get. Coming to on the process of allowing the residents to understand the impact of this proposed development, I do feel we have not quite accomplished the objective here. The fact that there's no specific development that the residents can look at, no specific development plan, plus the fact that some of the tools are not being used, like story polling, that could really illustrate how significant the requested building height and things like that are. I think we're missing an opportunity here, and I would like to ask the Commission to see if there's additional time that can be given for more community involvement. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Next speaker is Malcolm Mosher.
Malcolm Mosher, 14651 Golf Links Drive, and I represent my family tonight. You've heard from everyone talking about traffic, air pollution, noise pollution, which does go hand in hand with automobile traffic. We've heard ad nauseum about Netflix, and personally I find it objectionable that Netflix is playing hardball with us in demanding that a decision has to be made so quickly or they might move. I'm opposed. What I think should be done is separate the issue of housing away from this. I'm opposed to the rezoning of this to allow mixed use. And as I said, for all the reasons, there's no point in me reiterating what everyone else has said. Thank you. And by the way, you've got the little rubber markers to track traffic on Lark. There's nothing to track traffic on Winchester.
Any questions? Next speaker is Tim Tongas.
Tim Tongas, I live on La Rinconada. I wouldn't plan on saying anything tonight, but listening to some of this, I'm a little bit disturbed. I was, the letter of intent situation. I've never been in real estate, so I don't know. And as you can tell, I'm not in real estate because I'm opposed to this. But the Wedgewood, just going into that particular area without a plan and without a plan that's committed to is ridiculous. I don't see anybody ever doing that. But that Wedgewood Wimbledon area that they talked about, where if you have to move traffic, the issue you're going to have if you restrict traffic anyway is that people are going to now go Clearview and on La Rinconada. So that's going to reroute people back through a residential neighborhood that already has too much traffic. We've already went out to the county and looked to have speed bumps put in there because there's too much traffic cutting through today. And then you also approved more memberships for La Rinconada Country Club, which will, again, have more traffic. And, of course, they put the traffic counters out the same time you guys did during a holiday weekend so that you couldn't count a heavy load of traffic or get a real week's worth of traffic when school is in and people aren't on vacation. So that was a timely choice there on dates. But the residential piece from the schools, it's overwhelming the impact it's going to have on the schools. And if there's any doubt to that, there's something else going on. So, we can't build more schools, as you heard. It's been challenging for people to get into schools. The class sizes are as big as they can be, and we're out of acreage. So that seems to be a dead end there. Again, I like the fact that I use Netflix. I like Netflix. I've sold to Netflix as a company. They're not a company like Google that's going out and hiring as many employees as they can. They're more like Facebook and being very smart about the number of people they hire. They're also outsourcing big pieces of their company. I just hired some of their employees, so they're not going to grow. an employee count like you would expect them to, or like they may be saying they are. They've just renewed on their current spot for 10 years, so they'll be here for a while. And the last thing I guess I need to say is when you're looking at businesses, you always try to decide what it is you are. We're not Mountain View. I didn't move into Mountain View. I made the choice to move into Los Gatos or Sunnyvale or anywhere else. If they want to play hardball, I understand that the developer has a benefit. He's going to make money. I understand the town has a benefit. They're going to bring in taxes. But ultimately, it's going to hurt. When property values go down, all the residential taxes, property taxes go down, which you're going to have to put into sewer, police, fire, everything else in the way of improvements, I think is also going to have a negative benefit. So, and this process, I've never seen anything like it, not notifying a large swath of people and not having more open hearings on this. So that's all.
Thank you. Any questions? And then our last speaker card is for Rod Wilson. And again, I want to remind everyone this is the last speaker card, and after this we'll close for the open comment, and then I'll be asking the applicant to make closing comments. Go ahead.
Thank you. Rod Wilson. I'm also on La Rinconada Drive. And instead of rehashing everything Tim just mentioned, which I basically feel the same way, this process is kind of shocking that you're able to just throw out so many different options and what seems like not doing enough due diligence in the process. We've talked about schools and traffic, which are huge, and I think it's the reason that we maintain relatively high values in Los Gatos and why people move here. So I think it's going to dramatically impact both of those areas. And then the only other thing I'll mention is, in addition to the people that have opposed it, is it seems like the people that are in support of this project either live on the other side of town or have an axe to grind or are related somehow, whether they're real estate developers or whatever. So I hope you guys can look through that, and after looking at basically anyone who's been for this project, they're not in the heart of this. They're not going to be impacted on a daily basis. School-wise, I don't think they're going to be impacted, although again, we don't really know what the impact is because we don't know what the end result's going to be. So my experience in development and real estate has been that if you're going to propose a new project and look for rezoning or approval for a development project, you have a plan. And it just seems like they want to keep all their options open, which is great. It's good for them. And that's some of the comments I made for the last time. It's like if I'm in their shoes, I absolutely want this, but I don't think it's in the best interest of the town. So that's it. Thanks.
Thank you. And then again, that was my last speaker card, and I see no one else moving forward. So, I believe we heard from you speak. Do you have a speaker card? Oh, okay. So what will happen now for those new to the process is the applicant will have 5 minutes to respond to the comments that he heard today. And then after that, I will close the public portion of this. And the commissioners up here will have the opportunity to ask questions. And based on the comments that we've heard tonight, as well as what we've heard in the last meeting, as well as those that we've received in the packet at this meeting and the last, we'll begin deliberations and ultimately make a recommendation to Town Council. I want to make that distinction that this is a recommendation tonight to the Town Council, and that what is recommended tonight ultimately goes to them, and they will be making the final decision on this project. Okay, so Mr. Sedgwick, if you're ready. I'm sorry. I'm looking at a different card, so I apologize.
Mr. Sedgwick is welcome to come up and speak so eloquently. Thank you very much. I took some good notes, I hope, and I'll just run through real quick here, hopefully, within my time, just to address two misstatements, and unfortunately they were misstatements that came out of the meeting that I had with the Smith Ranch Court neighborhood. There must have been a misunderstanding. I certainly believe wholeheartedly in the concepts and the uses that we've proposed. I do not believe at all that the office buildings are single purpose to Netflix. by any stretch. They require a huge financial investment and commitment on behalf of ownership, and we would not be doing that if we only thought it was for one particular company. And I was racking my brain for a done deal statement. The only thing I can think of that I would have said in that context had to do with our deal with Netflix, and that is the reason that we're not marketing the site. It would be, if I were, it would be in bad faith, as we have a commitment to Netflix, and we are not marketing the site more broadly for a commercial use. The environmental review was incredible. It was very thorough. The town engineers here are, the traffic consultant is here to answer and dive into any level of detail that you all would like on the traffic analysis, or as well as any other of the environmental reports that were done. I'd like to reiterate that our application is consistent with the general plan. We believe firmly that the height that we've requested in the office is a critical component, not only for the Netflix piece, but it's the same reason Netflix is interested in the height that we would want it to be able to market for this, to have this kind of Class A office space in town. In terms of neighborhood outreach, we'll continue to reach out. The reason some people have said that we haven't reached out is my assumption is they didn't submit anything in writing last time. That's how we found people's contact information. I welcome people to contact me. My name and number and email address is in our correspondence. Or certainly, again, anybody who's submitted anything in writing, we will reach out to those people. Just to defend and stick up for Netflix here, I don't think anything that they've done has been in a threatening manner. It's simply been a statement of fact. They are hiring. They need space. They need it, and they can't have people hired that don't have somewhere to go. I look at it on the flip side. It's a statement of opportunity. It's not a threat. Just a reminder that the zoning does set forth triggers related to the non-office uses, the residential, senior, et cetera, and that they cannot happen until a minimum amount of office square footage is built and the passage of 2.5 years has gone by. That would be that first opportunity where another use we could make an application for another use. And then as another reminder on there, what I've shared is in respect to the letter of intent that we have with Netflix, they would control the whole site for 550,000 feet. I'll stop.
Actually, what you just last said, the buzzer distracted me. The last sentence, can you repeat it?
Regarding Netflix?
Yes, the 500.
The letter of intent with Netflix gives them control to expand into all 550,000 square feet, the site.
Correct.
So in that way, to the degree we move forward with Netflix, which I have every belief that we will, subject to the town's approval, I couldn't bring in an application in 2.5 years anyway.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And commissioners, any questions, Mr. Schenko? Okay, thank you. So what I'd like to do now, yes, Commissioner Telesford, do you have a question?
I do have a question, but I am not sure. It was something that someone had said about the property being sold. Was that a misunderstanding as well?
There is an entity, and it's a little confusing. It's in the development agreement that you see. LG Business Park LLC is a new entity. There's a new capital partner, significant institutional partner that has purchased the property. I remain as the development manager, applicant, entitler throughout this process, as well as any redevelopment.
So maybe this is to the staff as well. Does this affect at all the our agreement, our development agreement here?
The development agreement will be with the owner of the property at the time if the town council were to approve a development agreement and the owner of that property was certainly a participant in that development agreement, then it would be binding on that owner.
Would you clarify that
So if the town council approved a development agreement, it's an agreement between the town and the current owner of the property. And it runs with the land and is obligation to subsequent owners of the property.
Thank you.
Any other questions, Commissioner Telesford?
I just have a question.
I thought there was one. I'm sorry.
We heard a lot of comments about the the school district plight, which in our town is not insignificant.
Sure.
So my question to you is, as the developer of this project, would you be willing, I hope that you would be willing, maybe you could clarify that for me, to meet and discuss with them as this goes along, if in fact residential is developed on that site?
Yes.
Okay. Did we hear that? All right. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Any other questions? Okay, so I'm going to close the public input portion. I'm also going to take a 5-minute break so that we can all gather our thoughts. A lot of information has just been shared. I want to make sure that we have our notes in order. And then afterwards, we'll go ahead and begin deliberations. We'll ask questions of staff. And then again, ultimately, the goal for tonight is to develop a recommendation to Town Council. Okay? Okay. We'll be back in 5 minutes. So. with that applicant. Okay, so commissioners, we heard lots of information. And so before we begin deliberations, I want to see if there's any questions of staff before we get started. Okay, any questions? Commissioner Telesfor.
Yeah, thank you. Just a clarification, we saw a lot of substantial I read a lot of substantial in the agreement. But my question is, can you give me an example of what you mean by substantial change, that it would come back, or what would trigger a substantial in the agreement for the master plan? Okay, you said in the agreement, and now I'm going to can't remember which page it was on, but there was a lot of sentences about any substantial changes, then the town would call the developer back and then they would talk about it. I just wondered what substantial, could you define substantial for me, or better yet, give me an example of what substantial means?
Certainly when we draft these agreements, it's for the, not because it's inevitable, but we're trying to cover all of the bases that whether we know it could happen or not. I think the section that you're referring to talks about substantial or significant changes in law by not local, but by state, regional, federal. And anytime there's a change in law regarding health or safety of the community, we always have the ability to work with the developer and impose those new rules that would concern that the significant change or substantial change in law by a federal, regional, state agency. I think the most emerging area is in state law regarding greenhouse gas issues. If that were to change and the state takes some significant issues, then the developer has to come back and chat with the town about the project and how that impacts the project. Not a local law, but something. And so that would be a substantial or significant change that might have to come back to the town for review.
Okay, thank you. I'm new to these agreements, so. Yes.
I think also, are you also referencing, there's discussion about substantial conformity?
Yes.
Is that another part of your question? You. So substantial conformity means that, as proposed, this development agreement would vest the application to what has been defined in the plan set and the staff report and the development agreement and the conditions of approval or the performance standards in the development, in the PD ordinance. So if there was a change that was not in conformance, substantial conformance, meaning that it was not generally consistent with those documents I just referenced, then the town would have the ability to possibly condition it or possibly change it. So if it's in substantial conformity, it is vested. If it's not in substantial conformity, then it really opens up the door to be discussed again and renegotiate, shall we say.
Okay, thank you. I have one other question. May I do that?
Is it related?
No.
I have a follow-up to that. May I ask? Okay. In relation to that, the example that was given was greenhouse gas. Under AB 32, we're refining the standards that we are looking at on development, particularly residential. Is this an example where it's not a change to AB 32, but it's further defining it? So should residential get approved, do they have to follow the further refinements we get from Sacramento? The new standards that would be coming out on development.
So it will depend on whether those are mandates or guidelines. A lot of what's happening, maybe AB 32, greenhouse gases, wasn't a good idea to use as an example. A lot of those are guidelines rather than mandates. So what this would require is if there was a change in law. So if it was a mandate, yes, they'd have to come back and consider that. If it was a guideline or an option, then that would be for further discussions, but not necessarily required.
I think that refers to general questions such as that one. You're using an example, but just to give you a specific response to that question, this application was reviewed in conjunction with the Bay Area Air Quality Management District revised guidelines that were just published, and it is in conformance with that. So if subsequent things did happen, then what Judith said would apply. But in this particular case, in that one area, they are in compliance with those new guidelines.
Commissioner Telesford, you had more questions?
Thank you. So switching gears a little bit, in the future projects that might come before the town, how will the town consider this approved project as far as impact other future projects, since this is going to be developed somewhere between 5, 10, 15, 20 years?
So again, I'm not sure if I'm understanding exactly. Are you saying
the impact? Yes. How will you apply the impacts of this project to any future projects that would be close by in development? Do you know what I'm saying?
Whenever we're doing any type of cumulative analysis, such as a traffic analysis, we have a standard process which our town engineer, Kevin Rohani, will walk through so that the Planning Commission clearly understands the assumptions that go into traffic studies. But we do an analysis that includes background. It includes pending projects. It includes approved projects. So in other words, if this project were approved and subsequently the North 40 becomes, ends up the specific plans approved, it becomes a project, then the impacts that have been analyzed with this project would be included in that North 40 project. So it takes into consideration what has been approved, what is existing, what is proposed, and what is pending.
Okay, so you fold those in, is what you're telling me.
And I'll let our town engineer, who has intimate knowledge about that, explain that a little bit more so when we get to traffic.
Commissioner Erickson?
This presumably is a question for Ms. Rooney. Section 2.3.5 of the development agreement, I want to be sure that I understand. I'll let you catch up with me.
Where are they?
What? On page 11 of the development agreement. So if I'm understanding that wording, it would be at the option of the applicant to present a master design for the site. If the applicant chose to do that, then what's contemplated is that master design would be reviewed and approved by the Planning Commission, and then at the option of the Planning Commission, they could choose to delegate or not to the staff or to the DRC. And in this case, the individual ones that would be done after the master plan review. Is that, I'm just trying to understand.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And actually, Ms. Rooney, could you, I think it might be a good opportunity, walk us through the process. I understand once this recommendation, it goes to town council, they make an approval or disapproval, and then can you walk us through, if there is an assumption of approval, what happens assuming a developer agreement comes forward and all these different pieces that take place?
Sure. So as the Planning Commission is well aware, the application before you tonight is for a rezone. We have zones throughout the town, and each zone has prescribed uses and development standards, how high a building can be, how big the setback has to be, what the parking ratio is. So this would rezone this particular site to include development standards and uses that are in the application, in the plan set, in the development agreement, and in the PD ordinance. Depending on what occurs tonight with the Planning Commission, that application either would move forward to the next available town council meeting with a recommendation from the Planning Commission to approve, to deny, approve with additional conditions, or, of course, the Planning Commission has discretion to continue it if they felt that there isn't enough information, that they require more information. Once it would ultimately get to the town council. The town council then would be asked to approve the rezoning. And at that point, there's no entitlements. So you could not go and erect a building, demo the site and erect a building without further town review. So the next step would be architectural and site, and that is where an actual development plan is proposed for one or more phases of the project. And that's presented, then mailed notices go out, it comes to staff, we go through a technical review, ultimately mailed notices go out, the Planning Commission holds a public hearing on it. At that time, as Commissioner Erickson indicated, the developer has the option of submitting a master design plan that would have all the design standards articulated, and at that time the Planning Commission would be requested to either approve that and then defer subsequent phases to the Design Review Committee, which is a staff level committee, or retain the ability to have the Planning Commission continue hearing those items. Typically, architectural and site applications do not go to the Town Council. The Planning Commission is the final deciding body unless those are appealed by the applicant or an aggrieved party. There would also be maps, tentative maps and final maps that would be processed typically at the DRC. That's a very typical process. The tentative map, the final map would go to council for acceptance. We would envision a number of architectural and site applications. We wouldn't envision the entire site being developed in one. As was mentioned by the applicant, there is a trigger in the both in the plan development ordinance and in the development agreement that at least 200,000 square feet of office has to be constructed, and 30 months has to pass before residential could be proposed. And then again, that would go through an architectural and site process. So the land uses would be vested. Based upon the final action at the council on this application, the land uses could be vested if the council approves this. Development standards, height, setbacks, floor plates would be vested. But things such as how does it look would not be vested. Colors would not be vested at this point. So there would still be that final, what does the building look like? What does the landscaping look like? Those would not be vested until the architectural and site review process.
Thank you for that. So, any other questions, Commissioner?
So just to clarify, when you say site review, you don't mean that if somehow we thought that we needed to move a building, that we would be able to, move it? Is it already, are the footprints, thank you, are the footprints in place and that's it? That's the final?
Actually,
when it comes to us?
The setbacks are established because the setbacks relate to the height. So with each additional floor, the setbacks increase from Winchester. So the actual footprints, though, are not vested. So those could move depending upon how the building form is, what the building final form is like. So those could be moved. Yes.
Any other questions? Commissioner Telesfor.
I do have one. It's on page 4 of the agreement. And it's D, subsequent approvals. And can you just walk me through, especially the term where it says, which may include without limitation? Can you explain that a little, clarify that for me? What exactly does that mean?
That's just a catch-all in case. This is attempting to be an exhaustive list of town permits and approvals. Without limitation would mean if there was possibly one that was not included, it wouldn't be deemed not applicable.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay. Actually, I do have some for Mr. Rohani. I still would like a better understanding of how the traffic study was completed. Specifically, I'd like to know, it ties back to the overall EIR general plan, and I'm concerned about cumulative impacts. Since this was not examined in conjunction with all of those that were in the pending box, does this traffic analysis in what we did in our initial study, does it look at what will happen if this were to be approved, North 40 and all of the potential development along Los Gatos Boulevard?
Short answer to a question, yes. Our traffic reports, whether it's for this project or other development projects that are done in Los Gatos, we look at, for that exact purpose, we look at really the truly cumulative effect, not only the project which is being proposed, but also the approved and pending projects, to make sure we really look at comprehensive, look at the impact of any traffic generated by the project to the surrounding area. So certainly, even though this project itself, like was stated earlier, was not included in the general plan, but it, as a part of its development, going through the environmental clearance, was very comprehensively studied, reviewed, peer-reviewed, both by town staff and our own independent consultant, to make sure we have covered all the bases that we can, and based on our process to really look at the cumulative effect of it. And if I may add something about those tubes, that traffic tubes that was mentioned, what's out there today, Town of Los Gatos, my department, we have traffic counters. We use them for our own projects from time to time to get traffic and speed surveys. So we have some of our traffic counters on University and on Lark. But for this project, as a part of their traffic study, which started toward the latter part of last year, in between September and November of 2010, during that period, the applicant's traffic consultant had installed traffic counters, those tubes across the roadways in and around the project site. And also, I want to make sure everybody understand, by design, we do not put traffic counters when the school is off or when there's a holidays, or we want to get a true effect on the traffic count. So that's why, especially for this project, over a 2-month period, when the school was in session and things had stabilized, and before the Thanksgiving holidays. So the traffic counts for this project was taken at that time. And again, we do that randomly throughout the year by our own forces for various purposes.
And then to follow up to that is, I understand we've studied enough of these projects to understand that based on the uses, we use standardized numbers. I believe it's the Institute of Traffic Engineering. What level of detail do we bring it to Los Gatos' specificity? For example, what may happen on a three-lane town in Southern California isn't necessarily indicative of what we would want here. So do we bring it down so that let me rephrase that. A stoplight on every 100 yards, is that something that one determines is appropriate? Do we look at the traffic flow, the patterns, where certain traffic goes in and out, like courtside? At what level of specificity do we look at it versus just looking at these numbers that we look nationally and saying it meshes with the national average?
Every municipality, whether it be Los Gatos or somewhere in Southern California or out of state, they have certain traffic policies that it dictates, and those policies are adopted by their councils of or the governing boards. That dictates, how the traffic is perceived or is supposed to operate in that municipality. In the town of Los Gatos, we have minimum standards of level of service. You might have heard the term level of service of D, which none of our intersections are supposed to operate at below level of service. Level of service of D is our minimum acceptable standard. The Institute of Traffic Engineers, the ITE that you mentioned, that is a pretty hefty book that has a traffic volume for a whole range of application, whether you're building an office building, a hospital, a restaurant, or what have you. So we use those, and that's a standard industry practice to have uniformity for the application, to determine based on how many square footages you're building, how much traffic that generates. We take that data, put it in a traffic model to see what is the impact of that to the intersections that we have, throughout the area. For this particular project, Again, it's been I've worked at for extensively. 19 intersections in Los Gatos. All of the intersections from Hacienda along Winchester, from Hacienda to Highway 9, Blossom Hill, coming back on Los Gatos Boulevard to the site, was studied, the whole cumulative effect of it for all of the projects that approved pending both on the boulevard and including this project. And we made sure that we wanted to see the impact of it before and after, and none of those intersections would operate below level of service of D. Also, as a part of this project, the applicant, and again, whether it's this applicant or others, they pay their pro rata share based on the amount of traffic that generates and is attributed to the project and to the intersections. They are paying, and you see in the staff report and in the development agreement, funds close to $550,000 towards making some improvements along Winchester. And I can go into details of it, but we extensively studied that to make sure that none of our intersections are going to be operating below level of service D.
Okay. Commissioner Telesfor?
There was talk of, or I read somewhere in here, there was something about improvement to the University Avenue intersection and Lark. Do you have an idea of what that's going to look like or what that means?
Sure. University Avenue and Lark, right now it is an unsignalized intersection, has been there for many years, I think, since the beginning of time. The town of Los Gatos, as a part of our Creekside Sports Park facility, which will be coming to you in August, and hopefully going through the approval process and get that project underway, construction toward latter part of this year. We would be constructing a traffic signal at that intersection. As said, University coming to Lark, certain times of the day you have to wait for the traffic on Lark to clear out before you can make left turns from University. So there would basically be a signalized intersection similar to, let's say, Dave's and Winchester, kind of a T intersection, if you will. And that's an intersection that is going to be constructed by the town of Los Gatos and paid by this developer's project. So they are going to be paying for that traffic signal. We have that project actually right now. It's under design. It's our consultant. It's one of our capital projects, and we plan to construct that project later this year.
So follow up to that. Two questions. One more specific. It's in our capital improvement plan for the year, but is there any contingency? Because the money won't come unless this is approved. Is that correct?
We would be building that project. The way we have written the conditions for this applicant and this project is that they would be paying because their project is going to be lagging our project after it goes through, let's say, all of the approvals by the Planning Commission and the Council, and they go through their architecture on site approval process. There will be months kind of lagging our project. So we would be building our projects and funding it through the town's overall traffic mitigation funds, and they would be reimbursing us for that.
Okay. And then my last question, and it's more of a general question, but who decides that a level D is appropriate? I mean, if I'm looking at a grading scale, D is not satisfactory in my family. So how does one determine that D is okay and that's something that we should be accepting?
I believe level of service, that whole level of service D policy, that was approved by the town council a number of years ago. I don't have the exact date, but it's been inactive for quite some time, so we can at some point come back to you when it was approved. But it's a little bit different than the scoring for the grade schools. Level of service of D, I mean, a level of service of A in the traffic terminologies doesn't quite equate with the ABC, with the scores you get at the in school. So level of service of D still is acceptable. There are level of services of E's and F's. There are agencies that have signals running at level of service of F's, which is pretty dysfunctional.
In our town, D is what
D is the minimum
what council has
standard,
been
and
approved.
no matter what the projects are, large or small, their impacts cannot be more than bring the intersection below D. If it does, they have to mitigate to do improvements, whatever is going to be needed to bring that to a minimum of D.
It's also important to note that the general plan, all assumptions built into the general plan are built on that level of service, yes.
Any, Commissioner Telesfor?
Now, I switch you over to Wimbledon off of our Courtside area. So can you explain the design there for that intersection or the change that might happen or occur?
What our plan is...
Because of this development.
Correct. As I said, we have studied this whole corridor, the Winchester corridor, if you will, along the frontage of this. And what our plan is, let's say if this project is approved and moves on to the next phases, the current signals that we have right now a traffic signal at Winchester Wimbledon, we have Winchester Lark. Even though they're relatively close by to each other, they're not interconnected. So they act as independent traffic signals. And to make the corridor truly functional, we're going to be interconnecting, if you will, by hard wire, the two signals, and also the new proposed signal is going to be at the entrance to Courtside as a part of this applicant. So what this means, it would make all of these signals run in concert with each other. So when basically their brain, their traffic controller box works, and there's a green light here, all three of them are running greens to have the proper flow of traffic through the intersection.
There is an intersection at Roberts Road and Las Casas Boulevard. Do you know what I'm talking? And you can only turn right. Well, with the green light, I mean, it all works in concert. Is that what you're talking about?
Roberts Road.
Roberts Road, you can turn left and also right. But when you turn right, it has to be in concert with the very close by.
Right. That one, actually, these would function better because the one at Roberts, I believe, is at close to Nino, where it's kind of
yes.
we call it a dog leg intersection. And we have one also on Blossom Hill Road at Cherry Blossom in front of Blossom Hill School. Those are somewhat abnormal signals, not in operation, but just the layout of the land, how the intersections configure. These would be different, where their timing would be interconnected. So you don't have to go green, red, green. So I mean, that's been one of our emphasis as we studied this project over the past months, even since last year, to make sure the flow of traffic on Winchester is not going to be impacted, certainly below level of D, and if we could improve it. And as we did our study and evaluated and came up with measures that would help this, having this interconnecting would certainly facilitate the flow of traffic on Winchester.
Clear, the interconnecting would be Wimbledon, Lark. Would it also include University?
Yeah, we would connect our new signal. The new signal that we're going to build at University and Lark basically would be Lark University, Winchester Lark, Winchester Wimbledon, and Winchester Albright / Courtside.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. Okay, so let's switch from questions and any comments, whether initial or more detailed, that you'd like to share. Commissioner Erickson, you look ready?
I'll take a run at this. I'll try to make this coherent from a set of notes from the last meeting and this evening. Seems to me the project under consideration tonight is amongst the most important development proposals that's faced the Planning Commission and the Town Council easily in recent months, if not in recent years. It's a proposed mixed-use transit-oriented development that presents an exceptional opportunity for the town to do three things from my perspective: enhance economic development and tax revenue in the town, increase employment opportunities, and expand the supply and variety of housing in the town that contribute to the town's goals to have a desirable jobs to housing balance in the town, and to incentivize VTA to prioritize extension of Vasona Light Rail to Los Gatos. Those are all important goals for the town. Those goals are things that we can nod to, but as the planning committee, but are really the province of the town council. As the planning commission, we're charged with evaluating the key land use issues associated with the proposed development and making recommendations to the town council that ensure that this proposed project, as with any proposed project, is consistent with the town's 2020 general plan, and in this case, as in many cases of projects, balances the desires of a developer, the short-term needs of the town, and the long-term interest of the town and its residents. The proposal that's presented to us tonight, in general, strives to strike a reasonable balance among those competing goods from my perspective. I'd like to first compliment the staff for their diligence and hard work on this project to date, for their careful analysis and thoughtful recommendation, and for their counsel to me and other members of the commission as we've considered this project. In particular, I want to acknowledge Ms. Rooney, the Director of Community Development, Ms. Proth, the town attorney, as they provided useful feedback and guidance through the process, Mr. Rohani, Mr. Paulson, other members of the staff as they've worked with the consultants, and even Mr. Bradley, who probably regrets as a contract planner that he took on a project of this complexity. I'd also like to compliment Mr. Schenck for his thoughtful and forthright responses to the questions that were raised at the last Planning Commission meeting and for his answers to questions that we posed tonight. Your forthright nature and clarity about what your intent and what your desires are as a developer was helpful in sharpening. It was also helpful to have Mr. Hyman here so that Netflix came out of the shadows and was present in the deliberation. So I appreciate your being here tonight and your comments. I'd also like to compliment and thank all the members of the public who were here tonight and who provided us feedback tonight, at the last meeting, and in writing. In many instances, expressing concerns about the project, in other instances, expressing support, that the public took the time to study and review the proposal is really important for the town because there are long-term interests of the town and its citizens at stake. The work of the staff, the comments from the public, the feedback that we have from the developer and from Mr. Hyman helped us all get a better understanding of the proposed project as commissioners and sharpened our focus on the key issues at hand. After careful consideration of the proposed development project, the staff's analysis, which was very excellent, and the analysis done by the consultants was very helpful, and the feedback from the public, I'm generally supportive of the proposal, but do have several areas of concern. The first area of concern involves the proposed uses for the site. As everyone knows, there are three possible uses that have been proposed for the site: R&D office, Class A office space, senior housing, and multifamily housing. R&D Class A office space, from my perspective, is the most desirable and appropriate use of this location. The property is oriented to Winchester Boulevard, and R&D Class A office utilization is consistent and compatible with the adjacent properties on the east side of Winchester and the general development in the development in the general vicinity of this site and that end of town. A concern that I have, however, is the structure of the drafted plan development ordinance and the draft development agreement require only 200,000 square feet of office space, whereas there's presently 250,000 square feet of office space, which could result in the town having a net reduction in office space. albeit it's a different style of office space, different quality of office space, but it could result in the town having a net reduction in office space. The location of this site also makes it very attractive for senior housing. It's close to needed services for seniors, including hospitals, medical offices, and restaurants. In addition, senior housing is likely to create less traffic impact than multifamily housing units would, and likely also than the office space would create. Multifamily housing is clearly, from my perspective, the least desirable of the three proposed uses of the site. There's a general lack of family-oriented public facilities and services in the vicinity of the site. The site is along a major arterial with significant traffic, which makes the location less desirable for families. The most significant consideration or concern associated with possible multifamily housing, however, is the impact on the school districts and their lack of capacity to accommodate the number of students that will be generated by putting multifamily housing on that site. The second area of concern for me involves mass, scale, and visibility of the project. The proposed maximum height of the office buildings at 5 stories and 85 feet is a significant departure from the height of commercial and residential development in the vicinity of the project. To be consistent with the height, mass, and scale of other commercial and residential developments in the area, we need to be sure that the development is limited to a height that ensures a substantial portion of the building bulk will be screened by existing and future trees, will provide ample setbacks from the surrounding right-of-ways, and will have architectural features that will reduce the apparent building mass, because we all experience building mass. We don't. It's not just what the height is and the size in, we experience it, but so that the apparent building mass reduces as it becomes taller. Staff report indicates, as everyone has read and has been discussed, that the proposed 550,000 square feet of potential office space can be accommodated with 4-story buildings on the site. It would seem to me that many of the concerns that I've outlined could be accommodated more easily, not impossibly, with 5-story buildings, but more easily with 4-story buildings. A third area of concern involves traffic. The traffic impacts on the Winchester, Lark, Los Gatos corridor, that part of town, this proposed project, have been carefully analyzed by the staff, as Mr. Rahani alluded to a few moments ago, and the consultants, and they've used standards that guide our land use planning. I would reiterate our responsibility as land use planning, and we have to use standards to evaluate traffic impacts. We can't use anecdotal experience, so we have to use standards in order to be fair as we move through a planning process over time. The staff has analyzed that, the consultants have analyzed that, and they've used the result of the analysis and applied the applicable standards and integrated a number of mitigation measures that are proposed, and the staff has worked with the applicant on significant monetary contributions toward the necessary improvements that are incorporated in the mitigation measures. However, the contribution, it would be naive to say that the contribution that this project will make to the intensification in traffic in this already busy area isn't a significant concern to all of us. Hopefully, the future extension of the Vasona light rail to Los Gatos will help relieve some of the traffic in this area, and the proper uses in this area, not including multifamily housing, will help relieve some of the traffic impacts in this area. Pedestrian safety and bicycle accommodation in the vicinity of the project are also of a concern to me, and they've been incorporated in the mitigation measures that are in the report. The development agreement seems to me to be thoroughly done by the staff in conjunction with the interactions with the developer, and strives to balance what I talked about earlier, the desires of the developer, the short-term needs of the town, and the long-term interest of the town. Freezing of the fees makes me a little uncomfortable, but I trust that the staff got us where we need to be with the terms of the agreement and those preliminary negotiations, and since they did not make a recommendation that we should not include that in the agreement, I'm comfortable that they've done their due diligence with that element of it. Those are my comments, Madam Chair. At the appropriate moment, I would be okay with making a motion, but I would be very interested in what the other commissioners have to say about the project.
Actually, Commissioner, would anyone be opposed to him starting a motion?
No.
I'd say go ahead.
And I hope I'll do this okay. I would ask that Ms. Rooney and Ms. Prop help me along the way if I stumble. So it would be a three-part motion. I would move to recommend to the Town Council approval of mitigated negative declaration ND 11004 with the corresponding errata sheet and the associated mitigation monitoring and reporting program, supported by the finding that no significant environmental impacts have been identified as a result of the project. A mitigated negative declaration has been prepared with the necessary and appropriate mitigation measures to support this finding, with the following highlights for the record. To reduce the visual quality impacts associated with the project to less than significant levels, the mitigation measures pertaining to limiting visibility, tree screening, and landscape planning must be carefully monitored by the staff and strictly enforced as appropriate. To reduce the traffic impacts associated with the project to the less than significant levels, the mitigation measures pertaining to improvements at the three intersections in the vicinity of the project must also be carefully monitored and completed in a timely manner. For pedestrian safety and bicycle access in the vicinity of the project, the mitigation measures pertaining to pedestrian and bicycle access must be carefully monitored and completed in a timely manner also. Part 2 of the motion would be to recommend to the Town Council adoption of the Plan Development Ordinance as outlined in Exhibit 24 and the Development Agreement in Exhibit 20, with the appropriate modifications as may be necessary to incorporate the following changes. 1, limit the use of the development to R&D, office space, and senior housing only. Adjust the residential triggers and or other terms of the ordinance and the development agreement as may be necessary, such that the minimum amount of new office space at the site will be 250,000 square feet rather than 200,000 square feet. And 3, limit the office buildings to a maximum of 4 stories and 70 feet in height. With these changes, I can make the finding that the proposed zone change and the terms of the development agreement are internally consistent with the town's 2020 general plan, and specifically goals LU1 and LU8 of the land use element, goals VLR 1, 2, 3, 6, and 9 of the Vasona light rail element, and goals HOU 1, 2, and 5 of the housing element. The third part of the motion would be to move recommendation to the Town Council of acceptance of the proposed community benefit outlined in Section 4.3 of the Development Agreement, supported by the finding that the specified community benefit outweighs the traffic impacts of the project and therefore is consistent with the town's traffic policy.
So, Commissioner Erickson, I just want to capture that in a nutshell, particularly on the key uses. It's office and R&D with senior housing, removal of multifamily, and a height limitation of 74 stories. Is that for both uses
For the office buildings.
for the office buildings, and what would be the height that you're proposing for the senior?
I'm not recommending any change to what's in the agreement
I see.
because it's,
Okay, so-
if I remember correctly, the senior housing is 4 stories and 70 feet, and the other's 3 stories, and I don't remember the height, 40.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any comments on, well, comments, and then ultimately, I would need a second. So.
Wow. I would like to second that, but I'm really, I think you've covered it all. Probably expressed my feelings concerning the development as far as height and use. You know, I feel like inherent in all decisions that you make is an element of risk, and there are known elements that can be anticipated and unknowns that you can't control. And in this proposal, the payoffs and the risks involved are not absolute, they're projected. And it also occurs to me, and this is where I have issue, is the more in the future this development occurs, the greater are the unknowns, and especially to our town, its residents, and basically the future residents. The impacts will not be small, but they're unknown. And what will be built is also unknown at this point. And unknown is the town situation at the point of development in 5, 10, 15, 20 years. The North 40 and Swanson Ford will have impacts that are anticipated but not yet realized, and we will have to adapt to those changes. But I believe that somehow Commissioner Erickson has captured as much as he possibly can of this to make it somewhat an acceptable risk at this point. But this is only a recommendation, is this correct, to Town Council?
This is correct. This is a recommendation.
Can this be can we just, it has to have an approval or a denial, is that correct also? Could it just be?
Actually, would you provide clarification on, given that there are 4 of us, so how must this move forward?
So there's a motion pending. We're waiting for a second, and then the commission can vote on that. Anyone can make amendments. You folks could, as you've done on other projects that are being recommended to Town Council, just add comments. They see all of your comments, the community's comments, and so if it's a consensus, that's great. You can send it up to them that way. Even if you can't reach a consensus, then you should be sending up your comments to give them your thoughts and guidance based on what they've asked you to do at the most recent workshop.
And I'd like for you, whether you agree or disagree, just to share as specific as you can, because ultimately what is approved by the council should take into consideration each commissioner's comments.
Okay. Well, like I said, it's been pretty much captured with Commissioner Erickson's motion. I would like the council, though, to...
And also, Commissioner, just a reminder, if you would like to, if it feels like there will not be a second, you're free to make changes or amendments to see if the maker of the motion would be amenable.
Okay.
Process-wise.
What I would like to see is somehow to have this come back to us in with a site that we could see the 2 entities on the same piece of land. Before, you know, I don't know how we put that in the motion or in the agreement with the town, but I'm not sure that we'll have that opportunity.
Well, ultimately, remember, we're setting the parameters. The biggest one are uses, height, and setbacks. And once that is set, architecture and site comes back. So you need to realize those are the three things that this will dictate. So where's your comfort level on, you're ultimately going to see another application, but those are the three things that will not change.
My comfort level with the height would be to complement the Netflix building across the freeway, but I don't know that that'll happen. And my other comfort level with the development of the senior housing, if that's the way the town council would see this go, is at its required height, at least 35 feet, which would be in keeping with the town code. So that would make me more comfortable. So I would maybe second this if I could get some feedback on that.
Okay, well, let me see if I can make this more efficient. I will not be seconding it. So I leave it to the maker if you would like to withdraw or if you'd like to allow for amendments.
I guess the motion's out there, it's pending a second, and I guess I would entertain specific amendments, but wait to judge whether I would accept them based on what they are.
Okay, well, Commissioner Telsford, would you like to share more comments, or would you like me to jump in?
No, go ahead.
Okay. So let me just make it very clear. Transit-oriented development, I wholeheartedly support. I think I mentioned that in the last meeting. And I feel that what is contained in here are elements of that, office, multifamily, senior. However, I don't feel that the current proposal captures that all into one application. And so therefore, I don't see this as the vision of transit-oriented development that I necessarily see along the corridor. Now, certainly for land use, which is our primary responsibility, there has been strong arguments made for the need of Class A office space. Not only what has been presented to us with this specific hearing, but also we just commissioned an economic study that happened to be particularly for the North 40, but that study showed that there is a demand that can be absorbed by Los Gatos by a certain amount of Class A office space. 550,000 square feet was something that could be easily absorbed by this study. And I've heard by testimony tonight and also shared with us written. So if I'm looking strictly at land use of this particular site and deciding what's the best land use, and I believe it's office use, and I see that there is a strong demand, whether it's a non-binding letter of intent or it's just anecdotal, then I feel that the best use for that parcel is square footage of primary office space. And so that being said, I don't see the need to muddle the waters with potential triggers for residential use should this not happen. Because in a way, one argument is conflicting with the other. Either you're saying this is great for office use, but then if you start saying, but I'm not so sure, let me build this, let me build that, then that dilutes the argument. And I do feel that there's a strong need for office use. And I just want to simplify this. I want to make it very clear, this is the use that I support, and I will not be supporting senior housing or multifamily on this. So. Now, in terms of height, 35 is our standard. That's the policy we've been working with. Certainly there are exceptions. 55 feet has been approved for the other Netflix site. And frankly, you know, I like it. I like the way it looks. And I feel that if you provide a visual, whether story poles has been our norm, but I believe when that was built, other means were done. I think balloons were done in the past. I wasn't on board then. But to me, to jump from 35, which is our standard practice, to 85 without any visual for the community or for those that are living adjacent to it is just inappropriate, because that is a significant jump. And I understand there's visuals that have been provided in our staff report, but when you're saying that these buildings are going to be taller than the trees there, I just feel it would be a detriment to the surrounding neighborhood if we don't give them an opportunity to live with it for a week, 2 weeks, considering they're going to be living with it for the next 20 years. So I would not be supportive of anything beyond 55 feet. until there could have been an argument. I could have been swayed if something had been placed, and I could have seen it, and it could have been softened with the setbacks. I certainly think architecturally something could have been done, but I think it'd be irresponsible on my part to approve something without actually seeing something. And then, let's see, in terms of setbacks, I think should this move forward to council and get approved, I think the setbacks, if they decide that the height, increased height is appropriate, I do like the setbacks and the floor plate so that it does condense it a bit, so architecturally it would soften it. And one other thing with the development agreement, again, I want to make it clear, I don't support multifamily or senior housing, but should this move forward and it get approved, I would hesitate to have the residential trigger at, I think, 2.5 years. I think 2.5 years, a lot of things could happen, and if we have one of our favorite constituents saying that they could take 550,000 square feet, and they have a 10-year lease in their current site, I think a residential trigger at 2.5 years would be short-sighted because either Netflix or another high-tech company may want that 550 square feet. And I'd hate to rush into an alternate use if we haven't fully maximized what could be there. And I see great potential there. So those are my comments. I think we can mesh something.
I think we can too. Oh, may I speak? So I would agree with, I guess what I was thinking is, or what I was hearing from Commissioner Erickson is that given that there's an agreement here with development up to, and there were options, it was like option one for me would have been all develop, R&D as well. But then if that wasn't the developer wanted to put another type of development on there, my second choice would have been then to include the senior housing. However, if we have to rate them and put them in priorities, I would only want the possibility of Netflix taking over the entire space. Then you don't ever have to outgrow, hopefully, your areas. So that's what, I don't know how we could alter Commissioner Erickson's mind on that or not.
So as the maker of the motion, Commissioner Erickson, listening to this, would you be willing for an amendment or would you like to withdraw?
Not clear to me what the amendment would be, so it's hard to judge whether the amendment would be acceptable or not.
Okay. Would you like to, well, I'm not seconding, I see no
I guess
motion.
it'll die for lack of a second, any second.
Okay. Okay, so the motion, what's the official terminology? Is died? Okay, dies for lack of a second. Do I have, can I have another motion? Okay. Okay, then I'll go ahead and do one. Okay. Okay. Similar to Commissioner Erickson's, I'll gloss over certain things that I am in agreement with. I find that the findings as required by town's traffic policy for community benefit, agreement in the mitigated negative declaration, the mitigation monitoring and reporting program. And what I would change is that the recommendation to town council that I would propose moving forward is that it be for office and art/R&D uses, all 550 square feet, and that the height be limited to 55 feet. The setbacks that are contained within the developer's agreement certainly are amenable to me. And I would leave it as that. So.
Okay, I'll second that.
Okay. Now, any comments to the motion on the floor? Okay. So I'll go ahead and call it. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed?
Aye.
Okay. And then?
I apologize, Madam Chair, but I must abstain.
Okay. So we have 2 ayes, 1 nay, 1 abstention. In a quorum, that we can leave it as that, okay? And then, as prop, is this majority, or can you just clarify what just with this vote?
So keep in mind, this is a recommendation to town council. You've made comments, and you can move it along. I mean, you can keep working on trying to get a, 301. If you want to, you can leave it this way. That's the discretion of the commission.
I would propose to leave it this way, but if you would like to add more comments, since this is a recommendation to town council, I'd welcome any of that. So, okay. Seeing none, then this is moving forward. Ms. Rooney, when does this move, and where and when should people anticipate this?
The first available council meeting we could put this on would be June 20th. So most likely it will be on that June 20th meeting.
And will there be re-notification?
We will be. You just stole my words. We will be re-noticing, yes.
Okay. Okay. Okay, well, that concludes this item on the agenda. Okay. Okay. Now, Commissioners, we still have 2 more matters to cover before we adjourn. The first is report from Director of Community Development. So.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As the Planning Commission is aware, we had a town council meeting on May 16th, and the meeting was predominantly in consideration of the town budget and the capital improvement program. And the town council did adopt did first reading on the ordinance, did first reading on the ordinance, and second reading will be at their next meeting. So we anticipate that will be approved. The one nuance in the evening was the Gardino CUP application. And as the Planning Commission may be aware, the council did originally kind of bifurcate the approvals, I would say. They actually approved the use of full alcohol. They approved the hours that were proposed, the extended hours. They denied, however, the conversion of the next door retail space to restaurant space. So at the meeting on the 16th, the resolution came back for their consideration, and there was new information submitted by the applicant, and the council voted and determined to go ahead and reconsider the application, again, based on this new information. And that will be back before the town council on June 6th. And the only other item I have for you is that we do have a full meeting next meeting, and then we only have 1 meeting in July. So we have 2 fairly full meetings in June and 1 meeting in July. So we will not be adding a second meeting in July. We'll hold to that. And thank you. This has been a challenging night, and we do appreciate your diligence with us.
Thank you, Ms. Rooney. Commission matters. Is there anything from our commissioners? Okay, well, thank you very much. It's 10:51. We're adjourning.